Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be talking about Nothing Tastes as Good by Luc Dumas. You definitely don't have to worry that this is another book about cannibalism. It's not like I'm also writing a book with cannibalism as the main character, a cannibal as the main character. I can English. Don't worry about it. There's still time for me to have an epic failure that is remembered 40, 50 years after I die. Anyway, you'll also notice that this is called Ozempic because it is about taking a drug that turns you into a cannibal, but you get a hot body and you don't have to stop your terrible eating habits, which is going to become part of the discussion about this book as we go there. And if you head over to the Goodreads page for this book, you'll see a comment from the author that is straight up saying what the desired themes for this book were, which were to critique fat phobia and weight loss culture slash skinny culture, but mostly fat phobia. And so I think kind of what's presented in this book is counterintuitive to what the goal was, but that'll be part of the discussion going forward that I am looking forward to having with you guys. However, before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. There are a couple of ways to be featured. One of them is through Lemoy, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first video of the month, we hopefully read some of those submissions, and hopefully you have a new story that you can play with or a new section of a bigger story. The second way to be featured is the feature where if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out, if you submit the first chapter and the cover, that chapter will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. And the third way is my new series, Crit This, where if you have a story that you would like feedback on, published or unpublished, just follow those guidelines and I'll give feedback. You can check out how I do that here on the channel. And if you would like private feedback, I now offer that over on Ko-fi if you want to check out that. And that's also a great way to support the channel if you want to support me that way. The third thing is if you'd like to check out any of my books and judge me for it, which, you know, everybody has their own time with books, and all I can promise is hopefully an experience, and whether you like it or not, that is what it is. But there's that. And you can get any of my books at any of your favorite places to get books. With that said, let's talk briefly about the setup for this, which is the author has stated that this is autofiction, meaning the narrator slash main character is a version of the author himself. Also, this book kind of irritated me while I was reading it, so prepare yourself for that. I'm going to try to be fair, but my opinions are still in this very clearly, and nothing that I say means anything to a greater scope of any sort of rule or any sort of you can't do this or you shouldn't do this or whatever. I'm just talking about my experience in reading this book, my thoughts in this book, and why I did or did not like something about this book. Because every time we experience art, it's going to be subjective. And so I want to make sure everybody understands that while I may not have connected with this book or liked this book or how it was written, I still very much enjoy the context it gives us to discuss the book and to present it with you guys and to talk about it with you guys. Based on some of the things that the author has said about this book, there is a sort of thing about this that makes me think of Mind Fight, or think of it as a mind fight to get back at the people or ideas that the author doesn't like, and you'll see what I mean as we go through this. Now, getting into the story, we're going to start with the prologue. Quote, "He's full, but the hunger remains, always, the need to gorge, as sharp and primal as fear, a rampant desire that only the threat of sickness can sate. He's sick, all right. Will he remember this when he wakes up in the morning, or just know from the scales of blood crusted around his mouth that he feasted like a king? He hovers over the body laid out on the floor in an expanding pool of inky red, the splayed limbs, the naked chest, pocked with merry divots, the charcoal gaze slanting out of the broken head. If you didn't know better, you might think that the man was contemplating the popcorn ceiling, wondering what it would cost to hire someone to bring it up to date. The eater lowers himself to the carcass and inhales. The lingering body odor strengthens his hunger. His lips part, baring slick, ready teeth. The muscled shoulder, Jim-honed as if for this purpose, puts up a fight against the bite and comes away with a ragged, snapping tear. He chucks it back, champing like a dog with a chicken wing, mashes the sinew between his molars. There's not much flavor. Bland and easy, slightly sweet. The coppery tang of its juices overwhelms. They dribble down his chin, tickling, staining his shirt. Dragging a hand across his mouth, he leaves a glistening red smear. He gets up to grab a napkin from the kitchen. Paper towel, something. Despite what they say, he's no animal. At least no more than anyone else. Everybody has to eat. Some bodies are just a little bit hungrier. For me, this prologue feels like it was written before the story. And a big issue that I have with this prologue is it actually feels misleading to the rest of the novel. Like, this is the whole of the prologue. And the prologue itself is fine if it wasn't setting the mood and the expectations of the rest of the book, where none of the rest of the book actually shows any scene like this and doesn't actually show this character consuming anybody. You would think that this would be maybe a climactic moment, that it would be maybe a moment in which the character is going through a big change that you would then see later, but he blacks out later in all of the other scenes. There is no point in this book that it actually shows this sort of hunger and this sort of monster, and that he actually makes these excuses. He actually doesn't remember eating people for the most part as it goes through the book, and that's almost the majority of the book. We're still at like amnesia at 75% when he's killed and eaten 2 people, and both of those 2 scenes are fade to black and skipped over. I don't even want to say fade to black because you don't even get in the room with them. You just have him like mention and then somebody goes missing. So it's very strange, and I think that that's going to put a weird taste, pun intended, not really, but I think that's going to put a weird taste in some people's mouths when they start this book, because this is going to give you a sense of one thing, a sense of the type of horror that is actually not in this book, and then you're going to be like, well, where are these scenes where it was doing what it did in the beginning? They don't exist. And that is a risk that happens with people. That is a risk that happens with prologues, which theoretically should generally be used to set a mood, to set expectations. It can be written in so many different ways, but I think in being so visceral in this and then not being visceral in the main text actually hurts this book. The prologue also then concludes with a letter from Dr. Cecil H. Smith of Monstera Biosciences talking about the obesity epidemic that the United States is fighting and losing for the 4th generation in a row. They recently released a drug to help with weight loss, believe it's revolutionary, and the one patient recently described as having acquired a taste of flesh was not as a result of taking the drug. And the doctor is ready to prove with an investigation showing the patient was predisposed to that already. Now, going forward, we're going to get various documents. This is kind of a multimedia style book where you're going to have interviews, you're going to have letters, you're going to have documentation that's part of this thing. And one thing that hurts this story, and you kind of have to determine whether or not you think it's part of the case that these scientists have put together, which makes it confusing when it's kind of third person close on Emmett. So you're like, what do they know? What do they not know? But his friends and family and roommates all say that he always had a temper. You get his background where there was violence in it, where he was violent as a kid. And so then it gets hard to say, hey, this is because of the drug, when very few people responded to the drug in this way. And it is in drastic situations. You have 2 people that it says turned cannibal that they are hiding. But I don't know how you blame this drug when both were in abusive situations and already like held that anger inside of them. But we'll get into that. And I know that the company, like, believe me, I'm not on the side of corporations. I just don't think that this book was very well written in that aspect. But I know that corporations are going to make up ways for how it is not their fault, because that is what they do, especially when they've got something like this and they want to push their thing forward. But I don't think that Emmett was like the greatest choice for this, or if you wanted to play with the unreliable narrator more and like they were using his weaknesses against him by targeting him specifically so they could have this plausible deniability, then they needed to play with gaslighting a little bit more. But they just kind of villain monologue at some point that this was the point of it. So it's like, and the villain monologuing seems more like to tell the reader why this is, instead of just like letting it exist, and that kind of makes it much more cartoony to me than making the social commentary that it feels like it wanted to make. Anyway, the president or whatever, the scientist at Monstera Biosciences, which also, like, I'm all for on the nose naming, and also there's some satire in this from its existence, but also, bruh, your name is Monstera. Of course you're making monsters. Look, we don't make cannibals. We're just named Monstera. Anyway, this guy believes that the citizens of the country being a healthy weight is way too important to overlook and just dismiss this miracle drug that will make it happen. I just have to say that I don't think calling your business Monstera is a good way to dismiss cannibalism this way, or that it may not come from your business. But also, I had something else I was going to say on that, and I don't remember what it was. With all of that said, we enter into Emmett Truesdale as he stands at a vending machine at work and quickly tries to get something before someone comes in and sees him, making his shame worse. Quote, as the ring swirled, pushing his selection to the edge of the shelf, Emmett could no longer avoid his reflection in the glass. In the mirror at home, he almost passed for unremarkable, but set against the backdrop of the outside world, there was no getting around it. Around him. His 5'11" frame, his hair neon pink, fading to ash brown, framing the exaggerated circularity of his face, the bulging chest beneath his scarlet parachute of a T, Emmett Truesdale had never been bigger, but in some ways he hadn't changed at all. Even at the age of 5 or 6, growing up on the northern fringes of his Southern California community, he'd daydreamed of taking a knife and shearing the fat off his body. He'd fantasized about being impaled with tubes and having the excess sucked out of him, being pricked with needles and drained like a blister. His sides had been a particular heartache, the way the flesh, bypassing his relatively flat stomach, collected like meaty saddlebags beside and behind him. His chest, too, his boobs, as his brother called them, before his hand darted out to squeeze and twist. It was among the greatest frustrations of Emmett's body that clothes didn't fit it. Most stores didn't even carry his size now that he was a 4XL, but even made-to-measure garments rejected his physique. In his 28 years, he had yet to meet a tailor who could jerry-rig a pant to stay up on his so-called waist. The downward slide of his flesh formed between his expansive sides and at the bottom of his lumpy pancake of an ass. Even when belted tightly enough to induce necrosis, pants barely stayed up a minute or two before inching down past his crack. He'd grown used to feeling it peeking out above his waistband all day, safely concealed under the untucked back of his shirt as long as he could avoid reaching up, bending down, or ideally moving at all. This is all excellent characterization for how Emmett feels about himself, where his focus is, and just how negatively he feels. Now, something else I also want to add here is, like, are you actually wearing your belt around your waist? Because he said he's got saddlebags on his hips, which would kind of imply, theoretically, that if you pull your pants up to your stomach, you know, being a girl with free and wide hips, the widest part of my body is my hips. If you pull it up to your waistband and then put on, or your belly button, and then you put on your belt to your belly button to your waist, then they shouldn't like continually fall down your crack. So, like, I know that men's bodies are different than women's bodies, so I'm taking that into consideration with it sliding down your crack. But also, he mentioned he has saddlebags and it's in his thighs and his butt, but also he has a pancake butt. So, like, where is this fat? And can't you? Let me turn this down a little bit. And if you do your body, if you do your belt for your waist, how is it going down your ass? I don't quite understand what it's trying to detail, other than the fact that his pants helplessly fall down his butt. Nothing fits correctly, which I think would be the case for anything, in most cases, for most people. I think clothing fit a lot. I think generic clothing fit a lot less people than many realize. A coworker named Jazz comes in with Starbucks and muffins. Emmett turns down the muffins, though he can't take his eyes off of them, and he thinks that he should pick up something healthy-ish looking as a snack now that there is company in the room. He goes through notifications on his phone and social media, seeing an ad for a weight loss drug just pop up on his phone. Throughout the day, he's thinking of his health that maybe he'll die from, the grinder dates that have all turned out poorly. He covers for a coworker who leaves early and sits in her chair for a rest while he's working. A kid comes in, and at first, Emmett thinks that the kid is cute until the kid mocks him for being fat and sweaty. Called into his boss's office, the boss gets on him for sitting down while working, saying, "You hardly working, huh?" and tells him to wear more deodorant because people have been complaining that he smells. He finishes his shift, gets in his car, and looks at his phone again. The model and weight loss ad are still on his feed. Quote, "He wasn't dumb enough to be fooled by this. She was obviously photoshopped, barely even real. The groundbreaking weight loss treatment probably wasn't real either. But the sick feeling tugging down on his heart, this was real. The never-ending humiliation and degradation, that was real. The feeling of being trapped inside of his own body, inside of his own life, that was as real as it fucking came. Other than the obvious, what did he have to lose?" Mixed in with these are blog posts from Emmett, as he started a blog when he also started his weight loss journey. To show the good, the bad, and the ugly, as he called it. This entry details his difficulty in living on his own because of housing costs. He lived with his mom into his 20s before she moved to Vegas to be with her boyfriend. He found a way to get by, but what he really wanted to do was teach. Doing that required interning hours, and while he did that, he was mercilessly picked on by middle school students because they mocked him for being fat, up to the point that they plotted to get rid of him, and then this one kid that Emmett trusted and hung out with after class sometimes had called him a weirdo for wanting to hang out, which yeah, kind of befriending your students and saying, "Hey, let's hang out during lunch." It's kind of weird. He quit, but still wanted to work in education. However, the path that he wanted didn't pay enough, and he couldn't cut work time to get more training for the higher paying jobs because of rent cost was too much. So he had been stuck working at Target for 5 years, with his boss saying that he should work behind the scenes, and everyone was succeeding in their roles, and he was being called fat and sloppy while he lived alone. Emmett returns home with dinner for him and his roommate. They watch Friends, and it's an episode with Fat Monica, and they're both annoyed at the TV show. There's more obsessing about fatness, and the roommate, Lizette, is the opposite of Emmett, where he's ashamed of himself and his size. She embraces her 355-pound body and acts like the world is the problem if anybody talks about her weight. She's tried to get Emmett into her way of thinking. But it hasn't really worked. He brings up the clinical trials for the weight loss medication, and she refuses to go with him until he says that he went with her to go and get her tramp stamp tattoo when he thought that it was stupid, so she kind of owes him. She reluctantly agrees to go to the session that's an information session on the weight loss drug, just to be sure that they don't steal his organs when he gets there. The two arrive at the location for the session, learn that the drug is called Obexity, and also learn more about Monstera Biosciences. They did the monster name on purpose and even mentioned monstrous diseases. Lizette spends the time being offended at fruit and water and any mention of getting rid of fat, while Emmett just listens, which is kind of silly. Look, I know that she is against that lifestyle, and it is like a healthier lifestyle or a weighing less lifestyle. I'm going to go ahead and say it. Somebody that is 5'1" and 355 pounds is not healthy. And you can choose that for sure, but also just being offended at other people mentioning fruit and water and maybe you don't want to be fat. Like, are people not allowed to make that choice for themselves without you getting offended? Or, because I think that becomes kind of like my issue with listening to some of this stuff, because you're going to get pissed if somebody else wants to lose weight and you're going to try to convince them not to lose weight while you choose to get fatter because you want to, you love your body, which good for you. But if somebody else is like, hey, I want to do this, then maybe you should be supportive of that. If you want, it's about bodily autonomy until it's different than what someone else chooses. It's very bizarre for the whole conversation. Now, Dr. Saito is very in your face with odd corpo speak. Quote, "Of course we want you healthy. That's the whole reason Obek City was created." She cast her gaze across the group, her eyes falling on Emmett as if coincidence. "For the greatest health and happiness of the country." Oh, and I do want to mention, it can be completely in Lizette's personality that she's like, this is offensive to me. I don't want to hear anything about it, blah, blah, blah. Like, that is a true to life type of person, a true to life kind of character. I'm just talking about it in the sense of like the actual idea and responding to the actual idea and the frustration of that situation. And the frustration of like actually trying to discuss things and it's just somebody being offended in this way. So Lizette lectures about how that entire display was the most fucking offensive, fat-phobic thing that she's ever seen. What did she expect when they were going to a weight loss presentation? And what did she think it was going to be? And she then even questions Emmett if he will go through with it. She says that he is rad the way that he is, and it's only propaganda to hate your weight like he does. Everyone with a BMI under 35 was kicked out of this meeting, by the way. So it was only people who were morbidly obese or more. I think obesity is actually at 35. She still makes him feel like shit, even for being interested in this drug and wanting to lose weight, and he later has a nightmare of going under the knife and having his brain removed. Lizette said that he doesn't need this stupid shit anyway. Look, I don't think Lizette is actually a good friend if she's sitting there making him feel bad about wanting to become healthier or to lose weight, whatever his reason is. If it makes him feel more comfortable in himself, if it is for health reasons, because he already said that he was worried about dying because of weight-related health issues, like, she could be asking questions. She could be trying to get underneath why he wants to lose weight. She could be understanding how he's treated in the gay community that makes him think like this. She could be asking him about his background, which had an abusive father who was obsessed with weight. He could be wanting to have better control over his food thoughts because he uses food to cope inappropriately, and he understands that. We'll get into his background with food and both of his parents later. It does come into this. But like, she could be asking any of these questions, but it's the fact that he wants to lose weight at all that she's like, this is fucking stupid. You're fucking stupid. Why do you fucking want to do this? When it's just like, you're not a good person. You're not a good friend. Now, speaking a lot on self-worth issues, though I'd say that Lizette's not helping either. Now, speaking on self-worth issues, I'd say Lizette is not helping him either. Insulting him further for how he sees himself or what he might want to do is not going to help him feel better, and you're only trying to deter him from doing this by shaming him as his only friend. So Emmett's on and off again boyfriend, Armando, is over. He's an athlete and sleeps over often because Emmett's place is close to work. Emmett does his morning things, gets coffee, and sees an email from Monstera inviting him to apply as a clinical trial patient. He applies and is asked if anyone he knows is doing this. He admits only Lizette knows that he might do the trial. As he heads off to work, he thinks about how he's not close with his siblings because he is fat and they only kind of tolerate him. So everybody apparently only hates him because he's fat and not because he has a bad attitude. X to now that, but I digress. Everyone is always surprised that he's related to his siblings because they're so much better looking than he is. But he's like, I always bring their kids stuff though, so they don't mind hanging out with me even though I'm fat. Like, I wish that there was some level of examination of his own mindset rather than this being a whole thing about like, everybody else is the problem, the world is the problem, fat phobia is the problem, because there is definitely a level of his being an asshole and he is assuming that everybody hates him because he is fat and not because he has a bad attitude. And like, it doesn't have to get into analysis of all of this, but when you add on the fact that the author is like, this is a critique and response or satire of fat phobia, and like, it wants to be fat Carrie, and so then it's a revenge story, and so then it's like, he's the victim in all of this because of that. It's like, what are you trying to say here? Is he's got some culpability in the way that other people treat him, and it's not just because he's fat. And his siblings are not just like, well, you're fat, we wouldn't hang out with you because we're all fit and hot, however you bring our kids stuff. They've all got good jobs. They don't need you to bring their kids stuff. They want you in their life or they wouldn't have you there. So while buying a gift for one of his nibblings, he gets an email from a possible dream job as a future counselor. This is in the education field, so he's looking forward to it. The job title is Achievement Coach. Emmett goes to the interview. The interviewer randomly brings up how she lost 100 pounds before when she stopped being lazy and making excuses for herself, and highlights multiple times how at this job it is so important to be a good example to the kids. Emmett is hyper focused on how the clothes he wore to the interview don't fit. He is also worried about just the way he looks in general, since she is giving him unsolicited advice but just says thank you. And I gotta say, if you're wearing ill-fitting clothes to what is your dream job interview, probably get some new clothes, at least something that you can feel somewhat confident in. And I know that it's hard when you just don't like the way that you look. I understand that very much. Okay, very much. But maybe wearing clothes that you're like, everything is ill-fitting, I feel this running down my ass crack, she's judging me for all of this, is probably not the greatest way to go. And the following blog post continues to be about how he has always been fat. He did lose 100 pounds at one point, but gained it all back. His mom said that he wasn't a fat person in his heart, he just had to get there. Even his first boyfriend ragged on him for being fat. Quote, a snobby middleweight finance major from Rancho Santa Fe, Seb had this super hilarious habit of prancing around the apartment wearing my clothes with pillows stuffed inside of them and counting my calories without my permission. Tacos for dinner? Between lunch and that Starbucks, you've already had like 2,200 calories. He would snort and rub my belly, saying, if you're not careful, you're gonna get fat. Yeah, people can be dicks. Also, why are you dating this guy? Is it just out of desperation? Look, I know that some people, a lot of people, end up in relationships with people they don't even like and that don't like them because they're desperate to, one, not be alone, and two, just want sex that bad. But I am constantly surprised at the number of at just how often people get into those sorts of relationships with people they absolutely despise and who despise them and have zero respect for them, and then stay in those relationships for those reasons. Like, you can find people that love and care about you. Theoretically, hopefully. I mean, I say this as, being the way that I am. Being stuck. But, theoretically, most normal people can find some. I'm always just surprised at how many people are like this. Anyway. Going back to this, yeah, people can be dicks. I have been overweight all of my adult life with a mild reprieve a few years back when I had been down 70 pounds, and between you and me, I need to get there again. But I was told in college for theater that I'd never be cast in anything because there were no roles that fit me. The chair of the department said that to my face, and held true that there was only one person that ever cast me in anything, and it was always as a side character, so that is what it is. But it happens. I'm not denying that people are dicks when you are overweight, that people treat you differently when you are skinny, especially when you're stereotypically attractive. You're treated differently, you're desired differently. It happens, and you can be hyper focused. I feel like I am absolutely ugly and no one will ever love me, and I don't deserve love. But and that's probably for a couple of reasons, but partially because I've always been overweight and I just don't feel like I can ever be attractive, and I don't deserve anybody's attention, and I'll never have anybody's attention. And so I understand specifically the fat mindset and the fat judgment and the fat self-worth issues, but this is a lot to the point that there is nothing else going on in this person's life. The blog post continues with how his mom got him on some drug and a 500-calorie diet at the end of undergrad and into graduate school, and that's when he lost 80 pounds and slimmed down. So the only way that he did that was with an unsustainable diet that was extreme. He felt like he could finally have a life that other gay men could have when he was slimmed down. He met some guy that he hit it off with, but it never went anywhere. He graduated alone, sad and gaining weight again. He tried to do the diet that his mom put him on again, but he nearly passed out at work and got lectured by a doctor for starving himself. He claims that all other methods of weight loss with meds are just expensive anorexia, but also says losing weight proved that he could do it, and he wants to get there again. He arrives at his half-brother Chris's house for his niece's birthday and is jealous of the house, of Chris's success, and of how everyone else can eat, and he decides that he can't because he is too fat and he lost that job opportunity, so now he needs to starve himself and hope that he loses weight. So he shows up and he immediately has a bad attitude, is blaming other people for his circumstances, is envious of other people's circumstances, and then is holding himself back because of what he is assuming is why he lost a job opportunity, which it very well could be because people are dicks. I'm not like, but we're at the point where it's so over the top of punishing him for being fat that it's just ridiculous, but also he is so negative and mean spirited in general. As much as he says all of this, he also can't fight his impulse control, and when alone, he gives in and eats as fast as he possibly can. Quote, he began to follow, but his feet failed him. A lizard-brained impulse tugged him back toward the food. His hunger was no longer hunger, but something more urgent, more insistent, a climbing white-hot need for satisfaction as overwhelming as an orgasm. He could do it, should do it, while everyone was outside. If he acted now, no one would see. Before he could think twice, he grabbed a bun, slapped together a burger, and stepping out of view of the window, shoved the sandwich into his mouth. He barely chewed, impatient for relief. The mouthful collected at the top of his gut, the almost uncomfortable fullness spreading a sensation of soothing calm through his body. He was 8 years old again, back in the house on Whispering Tree Lane, standing in a walk-in pantry, door closed, lights off, scarfing down whatever he could as fast as he could, cookies, Cheez-Its, trail mix, ears trained above, the champing of his jaws, attuned to the sound of movement outside the door. He wasn't full enough yet. He made another. Eat it down quick before he comes. A few bites into the second, a spectacular fullness radiated through him like he tipped his head back and swallowed an avalanche. But now that his cravings for fat had been satisfied, his sweet tooth had to be appeased. It didn't matter that he couldn't stand another bite, that he feared he might be sick. This had never been about hunger. He grabbed a plate and shoveled cake into his mouth with his hands. One bite, two, and the slippery satisfaction slid over him, underpinned by a growing threat of regurgitation. Still, he gorged, programmed to clear his plate no matter the cost. The slider opened. With a frisson of horror, Emmett threw the plate down on the counter. I wasn't, not mine, someone else. It hung off the edge and flopped backward, cake side up, onto the floor. Emmett! Abby took him in, icing smeared around his mouth, chin dripping, a glob of ketchup streaking the front of his shirt like evidence of a murder. He turned and strode out of the kitchen. It's okay, Where are you going? She called after him. He didn't answer, bursting through the front door and climbing into his car. She shouted his name from the doorway as he tore off down the street, desperate to be where prying eyes could not follow. So, one, his family obviously cares about him. His half-sister here came looking for him when he was missing. Then he ran off really upset about something, and she followed him, trying to see what's wrong, and he just left without saying a word after binging. That's another thing that we're never going to discuss here, is that this character actually does have an eating disorder. He has a binge eating disorder, and he even goes, it was never about being hungry, it was just about satiating this thing, and it was an impulse. His lizard brain just needed to shove food into his mouth at the point of regurgitation. That is an eating disorder, and it never addresses that the underlying issue that he has is both trauma and an eating disorder. It says that fat phobia, judging him, is the problem when he is actually mentally unwell. A second thing about this is, you remember the prologue when it had it be like, this was about hunger, and so he just ate human flesh. His hunger here is no different than the hunger in the beginning. So when you make somebody so intense, and I get that this is reaching into likely very personal, very real eating disorder feelings and like eating disorder actions that somebody probably definitely took. We're just assuming here because of the author's own autofiction suggestions. But when you're leaning into that, there is nowhere else to go. You cannot blame the drug for making you a cannibal when you say that your hunger is already like this. What it probably maybe did, and it probably did actually make his cravings more intense, but he already says that he has this unending, undying hunger. I don't know whether you can actually believe that he didn't use it as an excuse to eat people that he was mad at, because all of his victims were people that he has grudges against. So it's not like it just happened to whoever was nearby. Is he premeditated the people he wanted to attack and eat later. So, I mean, we'll get into it when we get there, but there's some question about all of this. I also think that this scene just now where he is gorging himself, saying that it's his lizard brain and then running off when people are saying, hey, where are you? We're worried about you. I think this is all important in framing the story and exactly who Emmett is, and that he is not seeing either himself or the world around him clearly. And it is likely his own perception that is flavoring how he sees everybody else. It is also probably his own self-hatred that flavors how he assumes everybody else feels about him. Not to say that there aren't dicks that hate him because he is fat or think he's gross because he's fat. But then, he's got his best friend slash roommate, Lizette, who is also a dick to him. Now, this chapter concludes with a transcript interview between Emmett's sister and someone from Monstera. Sister Abby says how her mom always managed feelings with food. If it was a good or happy event, food was there to celebrate. If it was a bad event, food was there for comfort. Meanwhile, Emmett's stepdad, Hank, the man that his mother married, was very strict and routine. Now, I'm wondering how these two people got together when the dude over here is like drill sergeant religious about food, and then you've got mom who is like Italian comfort food person. And we never actually discuss how they got together, why they got together, how that actually managed, and like I think there is a part where he talks about his mom being desperate for money because she couldn't take care of herself. So like this is the guy that she got with, but why would he choose her? And then her fat kid, when her fat kid's existence is just offensive to him. The whole situation is so underdeveloped if you think about it. Anyway, Hank was an ex-Mormon and still did things very by the book in all ways. He criticizes Emmett for being overweight and made Emmett feel like he needed to hide when he was eating. Abby says that she feels like Hank was giving her an eating disorder by the time she left for college from the way that he focused on her eating and weight. And when she came back for Christmas, Emmett had gained like 30 pounds and she feels responsible for it for not getting him out of that house sooner. So clearly she cares about Emmett, even though he can't see it. Emmett receives a letter in the mail back to current timeline that he is accepted into the weight loss program. Lizette finds out, says that she is supportive of him, but skinny people die first in the apocalypse. So think about that. Doesn't sound like support, Lizette. You're just being a sassy Latina, a sassy fat Latina. In order to do the clinical trials, Emmett is told that he has to get a health assessment. He's avoided the doctor for a while because they not only make him feel shame, but they also don't seem to help. When he meets with the doctors, he mentions that he has an undiagnosed eating disorder. The doctor is then like, how the frick do you know that you have an eating disorder if it's undiagnosed? Emmett's frustrated because he's always had trouble being taken seriously when he mentions this to doctors. But it's like, you can give your experiences with something. He can say every time he eats, he binges. He can't stop thinking about food, and to the point that he throws up. And doctors can look at his body and be like, yeah, okay, I can believe that. Like, look at you. Let's talk about this. I don't know why a doctor, and I get that this is trying to do a critique on how the medical apparatus kind of treats fat people often, where they see you're fat and you go in for like a broken arm and they're like, well, maybe if you lose weight then you'll feel better. Like, because I've seen that criticism around, that every time a fat person goes in, they get ignored with just lose weight and their actual issue gets ignored. But that doesn't work in this case. Like, if you come in and say, hey, I have an eating disorder, I believe I have an eating disorder, they're going to investigate that, especially when your BMI is over 35. So I don't think that this was a very well done critique. Quote, the lack of diagnosis bothered Emmett as much as it clearly did Halleck. Back when he was still going in for checkups, he'd asked several times for help controlling his eating, only to be referred again and again to nutritionists and dietitians to be treated each and every time to the same lecture about healthy choices. More lean meats, fruits, and vegetables, less refined carbohydrates, saturated fats, and sugars, salad, nuts, and whole grain good. Burgers, pizza, and ice cream bad. Did they really think that he didn't know that? Or did those doctors simply think that he was incapable of understanding that the vessel of his brain were too gummed up with accumulated fat for the information to reach the process centers of his cerebral cortex? On a good day, it was irritating. On a bad day, he craved violence. The problem wasn't that he didn't know an apple was healthier than a Snickers. His problem was the hunger that didn't care. This was not to be confused with the little h hunger, the body's signal that it required sustenance. This capital H hunger, was not physical at all, but a compulsion fired straight from the synapses of his brain. It repeated every few hours whether he was hungry or not, typically manifesting as a 1-2 punch of cravings for salt and fat and then sugar. Burrito, then cereal, pizza, then gelato, tacos, then churros, cheeseburger, then birthday cake. Never just a little bit of either, never a bite or a taste. It had to be enough to fill him, stretch the walls of his stomach, even make him feel like he was going to be sick, like at Harper's party. What had started as a gentle nudge of desire would steadily ramp up the longer he held out. Eventually, it was throwing itself around his head, a wild, thrashing animal of a thing not just to be placated, but feared. At the worst of times, Emmett felt like if he didn't eat, he would die. And so I'm pretty sure if you tell that to a doctor, like all of that to a doctor, they're going to go, okay, this sounds like an eating disorder. We're going to send you to a therapist, or, we should recommend you a therapist. And it does sound like you need some help in controlling these cravings and getting behind the reason why you act like this. Now, it's funny because this book is going to mention 600-pound life at some point in it as a critique, because it's like, oh, look, trauma porn to show why they're overweight and fat people don't need a reason to be fat, which, okay, but there's generally a reason why somebody is morbidly obese to that extent that they become physically disabled. But not only that, it's funny because in My 600-Pound Life, they also always recommend that the patients see a therapist to get to the bottom of their eating habits, of why they do that. Because often, if you're in this situation and you're going through these clinical trials, you're going to have the changing of your body, not clinical trials. So if you go through these massive weight loss changes, you're going to have the changes of your body, which can cause body dysmorphia if you're not used to how you look. And you're going to have the emotional side of eating, the emotional connection to eating. And if you take that coping mechanism away, then you're going to have feelings to deal with, or you have feelings to deal with in order to help you get rid of that coping mechanism, or to better understand your triggers and how to control them. So in all of these cases, you would want a therapist involved with somebody's journey. However, we're never going to actually involve therapy in this. We're never going to actually involve regular evaluations in this. And at some point they're like, okay, so it's been a month and you're on this clinical trial. Don't even worry about coming in for us to check on you. Just like exist. Take the medicine yourself. You're in a clinical trial to become legalized. What do you mean that you're no longer personally monitoring these people, these patients that you were giving this testing drug to? It's so stupid. And this is why it pissed me off. I'm like, you want me to believe this is legitimate, and you're doing everything that you can to show that these people are not legitimate in order to make your point. And that is where stuff fails to me when it comes to satire, is you have to have some level of believability in it. You have to have some level of taking things seriously. Like, you can be silly, you can be exaggeratory. I should know. I wrote about freaking spies and stuff in my satire book. I wrote about exaggerations in my satire book. You have to have a base level of how things work in order to criticize them. And so if you're undermining all of that, if you've got your binging disorder, if you've got your traumatic past, if you've got your, my mom gave me a bad relationship with food because all emotions lead back to food, and then my stepdad starved me and made a big deal about me eating, and so then I got fearful of being seen eating, and so I would binge behind his back, and then he made me eat so much that I vomited, and then I feared eating around him, but he made me eat so much again to try to get me to stop eating. Like, if you've got such a negative relationship with food, then it's going to be hard to make your criticisms be about how other people treat fat people, how the entire society apparently only sees fat people as fat people, how doctors just think that you're stupid and say eat an apple instead of a friggin' ice cream, you fatty. It just makes the commentary harder, if not delegitimate, after all of this. Now, I don't think Emmett's complaint here is actually illegitimate. I think that the writing of this book is illegitimate, because when you have a compulsion issue, then yes, you often need help learning how to control those impulses, to understand those triggers. The doctor checks him out and somewhat shames him for his eating habits, making more suggestions of eating healthy and laughing at him if he says that he has trouble controlling his cravings, which this doctor is supposed to give feedback to the weight loss company. Are they hiring specific doctors to try to shame their fat patients into the clinical trials better, or like what? Because again, it's counterintuitive. And if you want to make a comment that shaming people doesn't actually help them to lose weight, doesn't help many to lose weight, and can actually be counterintuitive and cause them to eat more out of distress, then you can do that. But you're like making literally everybody in every extent, including the doctors that are then working with the weight loss company, also be people that go, fatty, freaking fatty. You don't need help with your cravings, fucking fatty. What? The dude doesn't believe Emmett when he says that he has been fasting, and he also checks Emmett's balls for lumps. Bro, if you take blood, you're going to know that he was fasting or not, for real. You don't have to sit there and bullshit him. The doctor had oddly red teeth, as if his gums had been bleeding, or he had been eating raw meat like the receptionist. And another thing, I understand that it can be obnoxious when people just don't believe you because of whatever physically. Like every time I go to the doctor, especially the emergency room, I went into the emergency room in like February of this year because I was in a different state and I stepped off of a porch and well, I slipped and my ankle just, and I couldn't put weight on my foot. So I went to the emergency room as that was really all I could do. Well, I went to the urgent care. But they sent me to go and get x-rays, and the x-ray ladies were like, hey, are you pregnant? And I was like, no. Or they're like, is there any possibility that you might be pregnant? And I'm like, no. And every time I've been to the emergency room prior to that time, because that lady accepted my answer, but all of the male doctors that I've had in the emergency rooms had never believed me when I said there's no way that I'm pregnant and I don't want to take a pregnancy test. And she's like, the lady doctor in this, and I'm like, thank you for just accepting my answer. She's like, look, there are a lot of people that lie about that. I'm like, I understand, but it is also very annoying to constantly be called a liar when I come in for assistance on something totally unrelated, but also just to be called a liar. It's obnoxious. So I get it. But also, this is a lot. This is a lot of people just dogging on him constantly for being fat. Now it's a day off. Lizette and Emmett decide to go to the zoo. They wander around, end up going into a cannibalism display because, of course, they have to go and do that. I don't know why these books, this is like the Lolita thing, where any book that has a predator or a perspective of a predator and a romance going on, they always have to mention Lolita. And this is like the last 2 or 3 books that I have read that have cannibalism in them all go, let's make this really big display of cannibalism, and they go and visit the cannibalism display and they talk about the cannibalism display to broadcast, hey, it's foreshadowing for cannibalism. It's so stupid. It's so unnecessary. They also run into Aaron, who is the guy that Emmett saw back in college when he had lost weight, who he'd really hit it off with, but it apparently fizzled out and didn't go anywhere with. He's ashamed of Aaron seeing him overweight as he is now, and also for failing in the education department. Aaron offers to hook Emmett up at some point to get his resume out there and to help him get a job in the education industry, since Aaron works at the museum in the education program. Lizette's wingmanning for Emmett, but Emmett can't imagine anything happening with Aaron unless he loses weight, so he fantasizes about the trial drugs going really well. Also, it should be noted how self-conscious Emmett is the entire time he is at the zoo, how he doesn't like doing certain things because it might make him be more visible to others, even though literally no one says anything to him about his appearance in this entire chapter. So it just shows the self-focus, the projection, the assumed malice that he has for others. Emmett then gets a call from the doctor and learns that he has diabetes, but he is still going to be able to do the trial. He also feels like he is just an inconvenience on everyone, including the doctors, because the doctor he was with the other day had another patient at the point of calling. A doctor would not have another patient in the room while he is making a call to you. So Emmett is anxious about the incoming procedure for obesity and having nightmares of the doctor eating flesh. So not only is it basically a shot like Ozempic, but also they're going to do some gene therapy thing. He receives the operation, but he wasn't given enough anesthesia to knock him out, and so he was aware the whole time, though he could do nothing to let them know. And I don't know why he also needed surgery on top of taking the drug, because it didn't mention surgery in anything, and now it just feels like it's combining bariatric surgery along with Ozempic, but he doesn't actually eat any less and he doesn't go through any consequences of binge eating after all of this, just so you know. The surgery is followed by a blog post of Emmett talking about how Hank, his stepfather, changed his life by being someone super critical of him and his sister, and how they spent their free time constantly calling him a lazy, fat pig, assuming that he did nothing but eat, lecturing that he had indoor hobbies. The time that he was called a fat pig, he told his mom, who got into a big fight with Hank, and Hank eventually apologized for doing so. To keep the peace, Emmett accepted the apology even though he didn't want to. The nurse then gaslights him that he couldn't possibly have been awake during the procedure. He puts, again, it just feels like it wanted another thing to victimize him over. He gets into the car with Lizette a few days later and heads home. In his blog, he says that he was traumatized and he's still hopeless about losing weight because he gained a couple of pounds overnight. Emmett hasn't lost weight and it's been 6 days now, so he decides to go to the gym. There, he sees a guy who he met on Grindr years ago. I don't know if going to the gym 6 days after a major surgery of some kind is really recommended, but okay. The dude doesn't recognize Emmett because of his weight gain, so Emmett sighs relief. He feels like he's in everyone else's way. One guy is all encouraging that he's actually out there and at the gym, but shortly after that, he turns into like an asshole because he wants the machine that Emmett is on. And so then Emmett just feels like his entire existence is a nuisance. He leaves and has a text message from the Grindr guy going, "Oh, is that fatty you? Well, good thing you're at the gym, cause bro, you are a cow. No, a cow's too small. You're a fucking elephant, dude." Emmett goes home, upset. Lizette's not there, so he eats his feelings in safe solitude because he doesn't have to hide from her because she's not there. Blog posts mostly talking about Pokemon, and again, Emmett's harassed multiple times for being a fat kid, including by Hank, who forced him to eat cupcakes in front of a mirror. Can we get anything else going on in this kid's life? I know that this is all important to this character, but can we get something, a focus, something for him? Also, this ends with some newspaper clipping of bite mark murder victims seemingly appearing in this town. Emmett meets Aaron at a restaurant. Aaron offers Emmett a possible job where he works because one of the program managers is having a baby and going to leave the position open. He says that he would love to apply, so Aaron says that he'll keep him posted. The waitress assumes that Emmett got the cheeseburger when she comes back to the table. Because he's fat. When Emmett actually got the chicken salad. It's not like this woman probably took their orders in the first place, right? Most restaurants I've ever been to, if it's not the waitress that brings out the food and it's like a cook or a waitress from a different section, they are going to come over and be like, "I got the chicken salad here. I got the hamburger." Otherwise, I don't know. Maybe the local restaurants that I go to are just great and the waitresses are just wonderful that they remember what you get. Emmett also is like, "Well, this weight loss thing isn't really working, so, oh well, I guess." He wakes up the next day after a night of binge eating and finds that he has lost 6 pounds. Quote, "He liked what he saw, but knew better than to trust the feeling. On a 300-pound frame, 6 pounds barely showed. He was imagining it, his mind playing tricks. But he couldn't deny the drape of his shirt, slightly baggier than it had been when he put it on. Had it stretched in the night, or was the obesity finally working its magic? I don't know if 6 pounds of weight shows that clearly on a 315-pound body." He doesn't want to tell Lizette about this weight loss because he's not sure that it's real yet. Emmett goes to the beach, 40 pounds lighter now, still self-conscious, while Lizette isn't, and is like, "Gosh, why are you so bashful? What the frick, bro? 270 pounds? You're supposed to be his friend, Lizette. Not only is 270 pounds still probably pretty big for him, but also, even if he looked slim, there's nothing saying that you wouldn't either have body dysmorphia or low confidence about being seen at a beach. It's been like a month. You're expecting him to totally change his personality, change his outlook. This chick has zero understanding of this guy who's supposed to be her best friend. There is a mental side to weight loss as well as a self-image, especially when you've always been fat. Emmett then has an interview at Aaron's place of work, the museum. He is down 50 pounds, gets complimented. Everything goes amazing. Lizette is making him new clothes to test her menswear skills because she is actually a independent clothing designer. He posts pictures to Instagram and gets a bunch more likes and follows than normal. And his stepdad messages him saying, I am so sorry for everything that's happened between us. Hope that you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Emmett is mad at Hank, but the words roll around in his head. I don't understand why Hank is reaching out to Emmett at this point when they don't have a relationship. His mom divorced this guy. This guy was never Emmett's dad. This guy never acted like Emmett's dad. And this guy only traumatized Emmett. So, like, who the frick cares if you feel bad, Hank? Go away. I don't know. Maybe that's just me being like, you lost your shot. At some point, there is no reconciliation. I don't freaking care. Case files say that Emmett's dad had a violent crime record, murdered somebody in his drunken rage, and that Emmett is estranged from him, but Emmett's dad's past might provide some influence on his later crimes. Then, an interview with the dad where the dad was on Emmett's side until he came home one day and Emmett was hiding in the closet having downed an entire thing of ice cream. The dad is like, what the frick is happening at that house that made you feel like you had to hide in order to eat? He asks this of his ex-wife, who says, our son doesn't even like you. And just like that, the dad is like, fuck you, kid, don't ever come back. You don't think that your ex-wife might be kind of being an asshole to you because you guys have a contentious relationship? You just take your ex-wife's word that this kid hates you when obviously he likes being around you. Obviously he trusts you. Again, it feels like forced victimization on this kid for this story's purpose, but not in a way that makes sense to tell a story. It's just making everything against this kid so you feel bad for the kid. But I'm sorry, and I'm repeating this. I heard it from Wendigoon earlier. Just because you are a victim doesn't mean you're important. And I hate that people try to use victimhood as a shortcut to character development, to empathy, because it is so cheap. Like, the dad didn't even bother to ask Emmett if what mom said was true. No way, his wife would never lie about that just to hurt his feelings when he clearly liked his kid. So Emmett is out to lunch with his dad and Lizette. Dad is worried about how quickly Emmett is losing weight, but Emmett isn't worried about it. He gets a call from Aaron saying that he didn't get the job, but he was in the final two. Aaron feels bad for having been the one to recommend the job, but, there's not much you can do if you're not part of the hiring managers or anything. All you can do is put in somebody's stuff. It doesn't promise that they're going to get the job because you recommended them. Now we get a blog post of Emmett saying that how stoked he is to have lost nearly 60 pounds and can buy clothes normally again. An investigative report tells us that Emmett posts on Instagram and then an Instagram post described as before and after with comments asking how he's lost weight and someone else saying he's on some kind of drug. One random morning, he wakes up with blood on his hands, nowhere else apparently, and he's got no sense of urgency about finding this blood. Like, it's barely mentioned. Quote, there was blood on Emmett's hands as he reached to silence his morning alarm, a dark, crusted smear across his palm, trailing grimy tracks down his wrist. He pulled off his CPAP mask and sat up, gazing at his upturned palms. Bella came sniffing, and he pushed her away with his forearm, afraid that she might lick. He'd heard dogs carry germs in their mouths that could infect a cut. But he wasn't injured. There was no pain, even when he squeezed his fists closed. Cold realization washed over him. The blood wasn't his. He reached back into his memory of the previous night, found it hazy. The last thing he remembered was leading SAT prep at Future Makers. Attendance was light. This time of year, the kids just wanted to hang out with their friends. Like Lizette always used to say, summer was for getting stupid. Lizette. He needed to know that she was okay, that this wasn't... He pulled the covers back and stuck his head into the hall. He could hear Tubbs clawing Lizette's door, wanting out. What was he trying to get away from? Emmett's heart pattered like a beat he rapped on her door. Lizette, I'm coming in. He burst into the dark room. This is such an odd thing, as there has been no build-up to this, and there has been nothing to suggest anything in this hunger that his hunger is different than the hunger he had before being on Obexity, beyond this saying that he has an insatiable hunger and is eating more than ever, but still losing weight and is always hungry. But this is not only out of nowhere, But also, why is he so casual about it? There's no blood on his bed. He's not looking for clothing. He didn't go into the bathroom to see if there was like blood in the bathroom that he tried to wash off. He's not even rushing, slamming himself into Lizette's room to see if she's alive still or if he murdered her. He has zero emotional reaction and there is no blood anywhere else. How is it only on his hands and wrists? This feels like a random push that the author knows he wants to make the story go in that direction, so that's where it's mentioning it. But we're at like, is this the 30% mark, I think? Yeah, it is. Anyway, he checks on Lizette. She's fine. And then he goes to work. He's not even worried about where the blood came from, and he doesn't investigate it further when it's not Lizette. It's just like, whatever. At work, he gets called into the office and offered a promotion for his amazing work and complimented on his weight loss, to which he knows the promotion is from the weight loss and not his work ethic, because his work ethic hasn't changed in the 5 years he's been there, and he's upset by this. Quote, he was still half in shock as he returned to the sale floor, his emotions a jumble. It couldn't have been better news, but the timing was all wrong. His first couple of years on the job, Emmett had run himself ragged trying to prove himself and earn a promotion. All of this should have happened then, but Rick was right. Emmett had earned it, even if the reward was a few years delayed. If people were only beginning to notice his good work now because of how he looked, well, that was the whole point of losing weight, wasn't it? You know, because nothing in this book can happen without talking about fat. Emmett goes looking at his Instagram, saying that he has too much attention to respond to everything and is getting trolls saying that he's not lost enough weight to post about weight loss inspo yet. And he sees a TV broadcast about a woman missing since Friday. He knew that woman. She was disruptive and rude in his interview. He remembers getting angry and then waking up the next morning with blood-covered hands. What interview? Why did we not see this scene where somebody got rude in an interview? Considering this is an escalation that we are supposed to be relating to, why did it not even mention it until this moment? It seems kind of important to at least see the interaction, to see the escalation, to see his angry thoughts about wanting to murder this bitch and shove her down his throat, but we don't. It would have been a good thing to have that interaction to show his anger. Cut scene, open up next scene with him being bloody. Why is the story so disconnected and spending more time on Instagram post-worship than on the actual plot? Police interview where the half-brother Chris talks about taking Emmett out with him and his guy friends while trying to help him hook up with some guy at a bar, and how Emmett has always lacked self-control in everything, including his anger fuse, which, again, therapy. Probably a different mental issue, but if he's got impulse control in general and it's both food and anger, we should be working on impulse control. Maybe this should have been flagged in a health evaluation. Maybe does he have a background with the cops already because he's got anger issues? Has he been to jail before? Has he gotten fined before for like destroying property? Like, why have we not seen this anger yet? Even if he was not honest about having anger issues to the doctor, we should be seeing somewhere in the story where he is responding. We should be seeing often in the story where he is responding to frustrations or inconveniences with the anger that show his triggers, that show his explosive, inappropriate anger. But it just sounds like it's a him issue and he never got help for his impulse control, which means if he takes anything that lowers his inhibitions further or something, as it seems this does, then he'll lose whatever sense of control he has left. Like the drug lowers his inhibitions, the same way that alcohol would lower his inhibitions. So then he would just give in to the impulses, which is probably why he eats worse now. I think something is missing from this when it doesn't have the therapy angle, because every weight loss program I have ever seen of this caliber comes with therapy to get to the bottom of the lack of control or the emotional eating, which clearly both of those things are happening with Emmett. I know that we're talking about corporations here, but this is also a clinical trial in order to get the drug passed in the FDA so that they can sell it wholesale. So a clinical trial that messes things up would be spending all of this money just to have the thing rejected. So why would you not take every significant step necessary in order to make sure that your drug passes with minimal issues? Lizette's got a major deal now and an investment to make men's clothing, and so she throws a party for herself to invite Aaron for Emmett's sake. Aaron apologizes for the job thing again, and Emmett wants Aaron so bad, but thinks that Aaron would never choose him because of his low self-esteem. Seeing him get close to another guy, Emmett feels familiar rejection already and goes to binge quietly in his room, only to find Aaron in there waiting for him. The two get physical after talking about Pokemon, and I haven't mentioned it before, but Pokemon is a pretty constant reference in this book, and here is a sample. Quote, "No, it's cool. Pokemon Yellow was my jam back in the day." Emmett smiled. Old school. Aaron inched closer to him as he studied the room. "So, what's your type?" "Sorry? Fire, grass, hopefully not ghost. I don't think my art can take it." "He doesn't mean that." "Water. You?" "Pika Pika. Gotta be electric." They were practically nose to nose now, close enough to touch. Aaron would have to be the one to do it, but he wouldn't. Guys like Aaron didn't go for guys like him. Even after guys like you lose 95 pounds, he was thinner, wasn't he? Emmett had forgotten, and yet remembering didn't make this feel realer. He just couldn't wrap his head around being desired. "Electric type, huh?" he said. "Guess that means you're my weakness." "You know," Aaron said, closing the gap between them, "I kind of like the sound of that." His snaggletooth bumped Emmett's incisors with a little click as they kissed. It seemed to carry a trace of electricity, a pleasant shock running to the back of his mouth and down his spine into his stomach, a yellow ball of electric current, lighting him up from the inside out. Bright and hot and throwing off sparks, his arm hairs stood up, his penis flushed. Every inch of him crackled. Aaron used his thunderbolt. It was super effective. Guys, has your penis ever flushed? Asking for educational purposes. Now reporting to Monstera Biosciences, his life is going great. He got a promotion, people take him seriously now, the gym is welcoming to him because he's hot, and he has a boyfriend who invites him over to the guy's house. Emmett gets to Aaron's house, they flirt, they seemingly have sex from the way that it's implied here. He immediately checks Instagram and worries because he's lost some followers. Aaron calls him hot. Emmett is then at an aquarium with Lizette when Aaron calls him saying that they made plans and he had completely forgotten. He has to look over his texts to see that those plans are actually in there and he's not being lied to. He lies about Lizette being in danger so that Aaron doesn't get upset with him for forgetting their plans. Both Lizette and Emmett are surprised that he forgot. "It's not like you," she says. "Do you think it's the weight loss thing? Why is this the first jump? Where has the losing his mind been that this is the first sign that it is showing up?" We should be, again, seeing this throughout the story, woven throughout the actions, throughout the story. Not like, here's a random pop-up event to then say, hey, you're forgetting things. It's normal for somebody to forget like one or two things. Like, forgetting things and forgetting your life and forgetting all of your plans is genuinely scary. So why it didn't lean into that when this is supposed to be a horror is beyond me. And if it had played into that more and had more and more small things just building up and building up, the tension would have built up for the last half of the book. But it's just not there. So now it feels random and forced and there is no tension. Emmett is now at work and someone calls for help, a normal customer who is overweight and using a cart. And she is like, she recognizes Emmett and she's like, "Wow, you are so skinny." He thinks that she is jealous the whole time and is judging her he is judging her for her food choices, which, while overeating bad foods definitely contributes to weight, it's insane for him to go off on her food choices because he is eating like crazy and just on this drug to lose weight. So like, who the frick are you, hypocrite? Maybe that's the point it's trying to make. I don't know. But like, he's eating terribly and he's like, "Well, what? Well, frick, bitch, why are you eating terribly? Dude, I tell you. I don't think that these two things work together, at least in this way, and you could make it work with it being hypocritical, but he's like legitimately eating more than he did when he was overweight, and he knows that the drug is the only thing that is making him lose weight. Maybe if it had focused on making his ravenous appetite stick to meats and he had no desire for sugar and carbs or something like that, and he had fixed his diet and was just overeating on specifically meats, because then that would translate into the eating humans, but it doesn't. He eats everything that he can get his mouth on. But him judging her for ice cream and fries when he literally binges every time he still eats and is just losing weight because of the drug doesn't make sense to me. He reports then to the company that he is losing his memory in places. At this point, it just feels like laziness to tell what happened rather than writing it and making it freaky, because if you skip everything and then tell me what happened afterwards while it was off the page, where is the tension? Where is the escalation? He knows exactly what is going on because he's telling it in hindsight, and there is no tension. And to give you an example, it looks like this, quote, "Then, this week at work, something happened that really freaked me out. One of our regular shoppers finished checking out, and we noticed that she left something at the register. I ran out to give it to her and saw her rounding the corner towards her apartment across the street. I remember going after her, calling her name, and that's where my memory goes dark. Like, I have a few images swimming around in my head, but mostly stuff that doesn't feel possible. Why would I follow her back to her apartment? Why would she be screaming? Next thing I remember, I'm walking back into the store and my coworker Jazz is like, 'Where the hell have you been?' She says that I've been gone for like 2 hours, and she's right. I turn to look outside and it's night. What the frick? 'What's on your shirt?' she says. I look down and see something red and sticky. I tell her it's cocktail sauce. My hands were covered in it earlier and I wiped them on my shirt." Bro, there's no way that your coworker is thinking that blood is cocktail sauce. There is no way she's believing that. Those do not even look remotely the same. But also, this is just annoying and flat. He doesn't even get angry. He's not curious. He's not worried. And there's nothing on the page. And then we're told that these violent outbursts are happening and he is losing his anger. Emmett then calls Monstera because he is concerned about negative symptoms that he is having. Also, Monstera apparently decided that they're not going to monitor clinical trials anymore after 3 months, so the patients just need to administer their stuff at home. They're also going to say that this stuff is making a lot of money on the black market, being sold illegitimately, and they're still not monitoring it, and they're still just sending it home with people. Also, he lost 95 pounds in 3 months. I think you would want somebody monitored for that. I know that that is your desired outcome of the drug. But pretty sure that you want to watch that to make sure their body doesn't fail them. If if you freaking want clinical approval, maybe this shouldn't have been a clinical trial, because then you don't need to be monitored quite as closely. But when this is a clinical trial for FDA approval, just sending people home to go and self-administer does not make sense. He tries to call the hotline since that's the only place that he can talk to anybody, and no one is answering. He can't get a hold of the head doctor, so he starts reading through patient files that he apparently has for other patients. This is a HIPAA violation, and why would another patient have files on the health reports from other patients? One of the patients was constantly getting into fights with her husband and eventually killed her husband and blamed the drug. Quote, Medina reappeared on screen. Stewart's attorney says that despite confessing to the murder, his client will plead not guilty, claiming that she was acting under the influence of experimental mind-altering drugs at the time of the murder. He added, quote, "If Tanya had wanted to kill her husband, she would have done so long before the clinical trial." Look, I can't blame the lawyer for doing that because it's what lawyers do. They make shit up so that they can get their client off even when they know their client is guilty. It's what they do. But how are you going to blame this on the drug that she shot him? Because she could have just been pushed to the brink. It would be better to claim that she had battered woman syndrome and that was a response to her extreme situation. That would be more believable than, hey, this drug caused her to kill her husband. She didn't even eat him or whatever. There is no way to prove that this drug did it when there is only one patient with this response and that she was already having issues with her spouse. It would have looked more suspicious if everything was fine between them, but it set it up that in all of these ways to make it look like a DV case that escalated. These choices do not make sense for what the story is trying to push forward. Even Emmett's case of going after people are targeted. They're all people that piss him off. It's all premeditated. It's all emotions that burst out at somebody. It's premeditated in the sense that he gets into his room and he's like, fuck all these people. I hate these people. And then he sees the chance to attack them, and he does. Every one of his victims is somebody that he knows personally who has pissed him off or offended him. The rude lady in the interview, Mira, who was that fat customer who was rude to him just recently. Like, these are chosen targets. In order to force more movement forward in the story, Emmett searches Monstera on Instagram and then finds an intern that he met a few months ago at the presentation. That he friends that guy and asks him where to find the lead doctor of this company. At first, the guy doesn't seem like he wants to give it up, but the dude complains about how horrible Dr. Saito is and, quote, "She's meeting with her lawyer at 11. I'm quitting soon anyways, so fuck it." That was easy. Why did we even resist for like 2 sentences? Emmett shows up at the lawyer location and says that he is here for the meeting and doesn't even have to prove his identity at all in order to get through security and just be led to the room that she is in. Quote, Emmett nodded and headed off, barely holding it together. That had been almost too easy, a taste, perhaps, of what life was like for the average-bodied white man. This is giving more of the same like incel vibes where it's imagining whoever is in the other group lives a different way and it's always better. Like it's just a fantasy built on resentment. He walks into the meeting and they're discussing the DV murder woman in the drug trial, and the pictures look a lot like cannibalism more than murder. The doctor immediately steps out with Emmett to talk to him and gaslights him how important this mission is. She uses her own, I was fat, and I also had a hard time growing up because I'm Asian. I also never fit in. But this mission for this weight loss is so important, and without all of you test trial subjects, it would be hard for people in general to lose weight. Emmett leaves partially satisfied. I have a question. Why isn't the actual head doctor in on this meeting where they're talking about the murder victim? So let me go ahead and spoil this for you because we're going to find it out in a little while here. We're at chapter 30. Dr. Saito is just like the PR doctor. The actual head doctor scientist at this whole thing is Emmett's stepfather. Why did we do that? I don't know. It's a stupid plot twist. It's a stupid plot twist for him to be like, look, when you were a child, when I married your mother, you were a fat ass kid and nothing I did worked for you. So you know what I did? I built a weight loss company. And then I targeted you with ads for it. And then I got you in it so that you would lose weight. What the frick is this? Was he doing weight loss? Was he a weight loss guy before? I didn't even mention that he was a scientist before. And suddenly he's a scientist that developed a friggin' weight loss cannibalism pill? Excuse me? Emmett then meets with family for a celebratory lunch. His sister is rightfully worried about him because he has lost over 100 pounds in 3 months. And we're talking about going from 319 pounds to like under 200. That is insane. And anyone would be worried it's either a health issue or a drug issue, an eating disorder, especially with the history that Emmett has with food. And he's had eating disorders since childhood. He was even the one who went to the doctor and said, hey, I have an eating disorder. So like Abby knows, and Abby has been watching, and Abby went to school and came back and saw him gain 30 pounds and was like, he has an eating disorder. I wish I had gotten him out of that house. So like she knows. He's not telling any of them about his weight loss program that he's doing because of an NDA, but like guys, they should legit be freaking out about the rate of his weight loss. Like there should be freaking mania right now for how much weight this guy has lost in 3 months. One of them at the table is like, he's hitting the gym. Don't you check his Instagram? 100 pounds in 3 months is insane for his weight class. Like to go from 315 to under 200 in 3 months is crazy. Sister says that she doesn't do social media because it's all curated and superficial. And one of the friends goes, quote, isn't all social interaction curated and superficial? What a bleak thing to say. And I'm not saying that people don't believe that or people don't think that or that there's not a lot of superficiality out there. But like this comment makes me think of some of you from the from the polls. Like not everybody is curated and superficial. There are people that are, but to assume that everybody is superficial when they interact with you, I think is a really sad life. I do understand it. Like, it's not nice being hurt by people. It's not nice being sincere with people and then being hurt in the process. And it's not nice being sincere and having people insult you for who you are or your sincerity and then like feeling like you have to be a certain way in order to be accepted. Like I understand all of that and it is super sad, super disgusting, but also being this black pilled is also really a depressing way to live. Emmett orders a huge steak. Immediately, he goes to the bathroom after eating it, and his sister follows, thinking that he is showing signs of an eating disorder again, which I don't blame her. If you binge eat and then you run to the bathroom when you have a history of binge eating to the point of regurgitation, which you accepted earlier, you mentioned earlier, your sister who cares about you is going to freaking follow you and be worried. She says this at the table after he gets back because he caught her following him and he gets pissed off and storms out. Then he is thinking, wow, this isn't like me to shoot off like this, except it is. We're told that he has a history of a short temper by all of his family members. It says that he has a history of impulse control by all of his family members. So what do you mean it's not like you? It is exactly like you, according to what other people say, unless everybody is lying about you having impulse control issues, which you say you have impulse control issues, so I don't know what we're supposed to take away here. At this point, I am not even sure who Emmett is supposed to be, but bitter and projects envy and jealousy on everyone because he's been bitter and envious of everyone else his entire life. Emmett looks at Instagram comments praising him to feel better. Aaron comes to check on him and insults Emmett's family, quote, "Your family were being dicks. You think? Totally. You can feel the jealousy coming off of them in waves. They wish they looked half as good as you, but they're old and straight and ruined their bodies with childbirth." Emmett snorted. I like that take. They were worried about him reasonably. And also, why is it always this sort of cattiness that pops out about having kids and straight people? You know, they're not talking about his family, but just strictly Abby. It's disgusting. And sure, he can be catty. I'm not saying he can't be a terrible person and still be suffering. Like, never are my comments, you can't be this. Sometimes it's just me responding to the content of the story. But, like, this character has shown me no reason that I should feel sorry for him, that I should root for him, that it should, like, again, you being a victim doesn't mean you're important. People being mean to you because you're fat doesn't really justify, like, you being a dick to everybody else for any reason you can come up with. And while your experience can shape how you interact with the world and the bitterness that you feel, it doesn't mean that I am compelled to care about what happens to you. Like, it just makes it frustrating because I absolutely hate you as a character, which, when this is autofiction, I'm sorry to say that about a person. Emmett goes home and his roommate wants to hear about all of the drama from dinner. He takes his first shot. Then there's an interview with Lizette saying how the drug and the thinness ruined Emmett and made him into a monster. She also equates being fat to race and how you have no control over it. Are we really acting like Emmett is not just a catty little man envious of everyone else? And now that his ego is being fed on the regular through social media and then a world giving him everything that he possibly could want on a platter, he got promotions, he's getting jobs, he's getting boyfriends, he's deteriorating further as a person from someone with low self-esteem to an egotist with low self-esteem, because that is what is happening. You can't be like, oh, he's fat and it's just like race, you don't choose it, and then watch him down 24 donuts and $150 of fast food in a day. Like, no, that's not believable. She talks about how he acts like the gym bros now who treat her like she's lazy for being fat, like was done to him. And it's like, the drug isn't causing his personality to change. It's kind of like when somebody gets money and they become their true self. They say that money is an amplifier of personality. You could say that this is amplifying his actual personality, where he didn't think that he could be catty because he was fat and so low self-esteem, but he sees thinness as actually something that makes him better than other people because he thought that other people were better than him for being thin. And it's not because other people, it's because that's how Emmett views the world. So maybe this is trying to say, like, Emmett's internal fat phobia or his internal judgment or whatever, but it's not the drug's fault that this is happening to him. He is just a terrible person. And he was terrible before he started taking the drug. She was terrible, and she's not taking the drug. Like, she's been a bitch to him this entire time and mocking him for his own choices that he wants to make. Aaron tells Emmett that the lady that got hired at the museum is garbage and was let go. So he's going to get Emmett the job because nepotism works. And they won't tell the museum this. So if he can get Emmett the job, did he lie about it before that they just gave it to the other chick and they kind of passed up on Emmett? Because now he's just like, I can just get you into the job, no problem. We're just not going to tell anybody that, like, I pushed you in there. He gets a call from his mom about the dinner with his sister and how it went, and then he lays into his mom for staying with Hank, quote, just to get child support. And that's true, and it really pisses me off, like, just how hateful this book is. Quote, Joanna began, and Emmett braced himself. I just wanted to make sure you're healthy, honey. That word again. healthy. It had always hovered around the objections made against his body. Now it spiked his cortisol, winding his nerves like over-tightened piano strings. Suddenly, everyone's so concerned about my health, he snapped. Did you just want me to be healthy when you were encouraging me to eat my feelings as a kid? When you guilted me if I didn't have seconds or thirds of your cooking? I never. How about when you were taking me to the hostess outlet? When you knew that Hank was abusing me and you kept me in his care for years? Don't you? The change was instant. The nasal softness of her sweet mommy coo steeled over into a harsh declaration. Don't rewrite history. When I found out what he was doing, I went mama bear on his ass, and I know you know that because you wrote about it in your blog. But he didn't stop. You knew it was getting worse and you stayed. I thought he changed. That's not what Dad said. She paused, apparently shocked. What? When? When I was in college. We had a few drinks one night and he told me everything. That you knew that you were going to divorce Hank, but you wanted to make sure that you got child support on top of your alimony and you were trying to get pregnant with him knowing that you'd leave him after the baby was born. The heat of her fury radiated through the phone. Fucker. So it's true. You stayed for money. Money that I could use to take care of you when we left. Which we did. This makes me so angry, dude. This makes me so angry. Again, this is incel and MRA talking points that pretend that if you have a kid, you can just steal child support. Number one, that's your kid too, to the fathers. So I don't know why these books, these MRAs, these whatever that use this talking point pretend that that child is not theirs, that they should be helping to take care of. You don't just pump and dump and run. I mean, you do if you're an asshole. But like, that's your kid too. Should you not be caring about the well-being of that child if you're not an asshole? Number two, there is no guarantee to child support. I should know. My dad didn't pay child support on 4 kids to the wife that he married for over 20 years. He got a worse paying job just to go back to the judge to ask for the child support that he owed to be removed, and it worked. It was lowered and lowered, and then he got a 6-figure job again after my youngest sister turned 18. People act like child support is some effortless scam that women run constantly on men, and every woman is a conniving bitch, as if raising a child doesn't cost a lot of money, as if even having the child in the hospital doesn't cost a lot of money. Which, from this book's perspective so far, it's not surprising that it acts this way. Emmett can't see his sister and mom care about him and would rather shit-talk women with his boyfriend than fess up that he is a piece of shit, that he is an adult that needs to take accountability for himself instead of blaming everybody else. But also, he blames everybody else for his treatment. He blames everybody else for his actions, his personality. His friends blame everybody else for his actions and personality that are shitty. And then he also blames everybody else for his fatness. But then also goes, hey, it's not about health. Bro, you wear a CPAP and you got diabetes that went away when you lost weight. What do you mean you're going to say that it's not about health while you also prove within the narrative that obesity is health related? What are we doing here? Emmett continues. Quote, I'm sorry, okay? I fucked up. I was a terrible parent, and it's all my fault. But Jesus Christ, you're practically 30. At some point, you have to stop blaming your problems on mommy and daddy. I was a shitty parent. But as an adult, what you do with your life is on you. No one can make you put food in your mouth. Only you can do that. Emmett felt like he'd been slapped. Every part of him wanted to strike back. So that's it then. It's that easy. You just get to have kids, fuck them up, shove them out into the world that hates them, and call it a day. You get to just... He strained for another bruising turn of phrase, frustrated when it didn't come. He couldn't find the words to express the lava surging through his heart, his revulsion at this world in which he was forced to live, a world that never stopped telling him what he needed to be, do, look like, and own while making these things ever harder to attain, a world where people were systemically fattened like farm animals and then shamed for it, blamed for it, refused help by the medical communities that condemned them, and called lazy and stupid when they failed to overcome the odds. A world, worst of all, that cared about none of it, refusing to ask any of the questions that mattered. How did we get here? Why did we let it get this bad? Where do we go from here? Okay, it's not anybody else's it's not anybody else's responsibility. You can have legitimate claims of why do people act like this? Why do people treat others like this? These are issues in which we are going to discuss that are existent in society reality. But also, this guy's big issue in this paragraph, as it comes off, is he cares so much about what other people think. He is performing for others, or thinks he has to perform for others, be a certain way because he doesn't want people to say certain things about him. He is stuck in a high school mindset. I mean, there are plenty of adults care more about what people think than actually what they are. So there is also that. But all of this is what they'll say, what they'll think, what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to dress. Who cares? Literally, who cares? I know, look at me. I'm a poster child of who cares. It's so stupid. These people act like having a kid is a get-rich-quick scheme when kids cost so much money. What the hell is this? Emmett blames his mom for him being diet-obsessed. Quote, "You upheld patriarchal beauty standards for me, and that's why I care about all of this weight loss, but also you were so much about food that we ate for celebration and sadness, and you forced me to have seconds and thirds, and I was overweight at 4 years old." He is making his mom a boogeyman who loved him but also ruined his entire life by making him fat and skinny, and marrying somebody who hated fat people while she's probably also overweight if this is how she thinks, if this is how she operates. It's so stupid. None of it makes sense. This is just a project in order to project every issue that this writer has. This isn't a coherent story. This is just emotional purging with a fake narrative to pretend that it justifies everything. It's a mind fight. He then randomly decides to try cannibalism literally out of nowhere. Quote, "Call over." He remained perched on the edge of his bed. His hunger grew like a sinkhole opening inside of him, a great black swallowing abyss that only food seemed capable of filling, only meat, human meat. The thought struck him like a hammer to the back of the head, a shock reverberating through each and every inch of his body. Why would he? How could he even imagine such a thing? What the fuck is wrong with me? He blamed the movie. That was why he didn't watch horror. But Emmett had always been good at talking himself into food he shouldn't eat. The thought of the savage hunger exhibition at the Museum of Us. In some cultures around the world, he reasoned, cannibalism was normal. People had been eating each other for a millennia, not just for survival like the donor party, but for connections to a higher power, even as medicine. Was it any worse than whatever factory processed slop they served at the drive-thru? The practice was condemned like Emmett's fat body, not for any logical reason, but because society had decided somewhere along the line that it was objectionable. But did that mean that he had to too? Disturbing as the craving was, part of him was tired of feeling ashamed of his desires. He resented having to deny his body what it craved. The world had put this hunger in him. Maybe it was time they faced the consequences. So we're now at the Carrie moment. There's no lead up to this. There is no anything. And these thoughts just pop into his mind as if he hasn't woken up with blood on his hands before. This isn't a revelation because he's already been doing this. Plus, the way that this talks, it's not the diet. It's wrath at the world, and he is choosing to punish people and punish people in the way that they hated him for. As food. It's very specific in the motivations, and we see these motivations as in his entire background and how he blames others for hating him for eating. So you know how he's going to get back at them? By eating them. Like, it's all very premeditated. It's not the drug. Now at 62%, he wakes up with blood on him, remembers his cannibalism thoughts, but can't remember anything else and is surprised. It's like we haven't gone anywhere in 30+% of this book since he already woke up with amnesia and blood multiple times before. This isn't an escalation. He goes to shower it off and Aaron appears. Aaron comes into the bathroom to check on Emmett since he dipped randomly last night when they were together, and he also flirts with him until he sees Emmett naked in the shower and his sagging skin, and he runs off disgusted. The implication in the previous parts of the book is that they'd slept together before. How is this the first time that the dude is seeing Emmett naked? If they haven't slept together and Emmett had been bashful about being seen naked, then why would this dude violate that and just walk into the bathroom without being welcomed in? His walking in without Emmett saying, "Hey, come on in," implies that they have already been naked together, and so it's comfortable, and there's kind of implied consent there since they've done that. If they haven't crossed that barrier yet, if they haven't crossed that boundary, I don't know why Aaron would just walk in without being invited in. I know, you can have sex with the lights off, but Aaron doesn't even talk to Emmett, isn't worried about his health if he is so desperately skinny suddenly. It's like nothing. Emmett goes outside to clean his car and the blood inside of it, and the apartment manager sees him. How did no one see the crime scene literally in his car all night, or the trail of blood that must have come from it if it was so bad he needed to go in and clean the car up? She also calls him out as the number 213, and this mofo literally made Emmett's apartment number the same as Jeffrey Dahmer's. I don't know if I should be ashamed that I know that and that I caught on to it immediately, but I did. I did. And considering the cannibalism set up early, the museum thing, I'm sure he thought he was being clever. At work, Emmett resigns, and it's assumed it's because he lost weight. Quote, "You're quitting? It wasn't a question this time. Unbelievable. I guess you think that you're too good for us now that you've lost weight." Emmett was incredulous. Rick seemed to take the news as a personal insult. There was something insecure in his anger. The manager unbuttoned his jacket over his paunch. "Just remember, we were here for you before you were Mr. Handsome. We gave you a job when you were just a big fat nobody. Who are these people? I know that some bosses, a lot of bosses, can be petty when you step out, but what the frick is this? No one cares this much about weight. Weight is not important to being a manager at Target, except for the fact that Rick only promoted him because he got skinny. Also, bro, you are being a freaking weirdo with your Mr. Handsome comment. This is just glazing the author at this point." Emmett resigns. The boss is so pissed that he bans Emmett from the store. Emmett is like, "You can't do that," and he leaves. Remembers the dude that he killed was the gym bro who acted impatient at him at the gym the other day. And this guy has the worst anger issues of all time. Somebody says something passive aggressive at him, and he's like, "You need to fucking die. I'm gonna eat you." Weight isn't the issue here. Lack of emotional control and an explosive anger is. And then there's a blog post blaming everyone else for Emmett's becoming a monster and anyone else becoming a monster. I think it's only been said / implied that 2 patients of all of them have become cannibals. And if this was such a common issue, why isn't Monstera observing all of their patients in the trial study? You cannot blame the medicine when it is such a small sample size that is showing. Like, if you had 1,000 people taking vitamin B12 and one of them ended up a cannibal, you cannot be like, well, it's the vitamin B12 because one of them became a cannibal. I think we need to look at the extenuating circumstances of all of these people because this is not the drug's fault. And if the drug makes people inebriated and they know that, then they would be watching because they want FDA approval. Like, I can believe the fantastical elements of this so much easier than I can any of the other elements because it's trying to do a social commentary, but you can't do a social commentary when your information is so completely out of whack. You could tell me that he's going to shoot up 6 Ozempic things at once and then become a 900-pound blob man. I'll believe that. I will not believe this bullshit that it's trying to become FDA approved and it's going to become FDA approved while they're not even studying their patients. So Emmett gets rid of his car with a giant fire and a body in the back. The roommate catches on that he lied to her, and the roommate catches on that he lied to her, and she makes him come clean. She accepts him for what he is doing, probably because she thinks they all deserve it for making fun of him because he was fat, and she's like, well, you're a skinny bitch, so I don't really care about you anyway. And though she's like, this sucks if you can't control it, I need some time to process, she's also like, I'm gonna be with you until the end, bro. So she really... It's just a way out so she doesn't have to opine. He tries to live as normally as possible. His roommate makes him dump the drugs that he has. He is like, oh no, my eating is still out of control even though I stopped taking the drug. Bro, your eating has always been out of control, especially on the drug. You realize that you couldn't gain weight while on the drug because it was whatever, just burning fat magically while you were binge eating. Those drugs made you ravenous. Those drugs made you ravenous. And the only difference was they burned through what you ate rapidly. This is so stupid and predictable. You even said you emotionally eat in this chapter to deal with stress and then her surprise Pikachu face when you put on weight. He tries to get more drugs from the doctor since he dumped all of them, but won't tell them that. And they're like, you said that you skipped some doses, so you should be able to just take those. We don't need to give you new doses unless you've sold them because you would make bank, because those are going crazy on the black market right now. Okay, so you're not monitoring patients with a drug that people are actively selling while it's restricted. and you're not checking up on them regularly to make sure they're taking them and not selling them, this book is so dumb. And this guy out here is like, no, how could you even assume that anyone would sell those for money? No fat people would ever choose money over being fat. No. Bro, Lizette is your roommate. She would choose the money over becoming skinny. Because he's still a massive overeater, he's gaining weight and is super upsetty about it now that he's not taking the magic drugs. It's not like his eating habits have changed at all while he's been on the diet. Quote, he had to start losing again, but without obexity, he had only diet and exercise. Jumping back on the deprivation hamster wheel barely reduced his gain. It defied mathematical logic. Each pound gained equated to 3,500 surplus calories. That's what he'd always been taught. But if that was true, how could he have put on 2.5 pounds overnight when he was only consuming 1,000 calories per day and practically killed himself doing it? They needed to give this guy some nutritional education. I know that he complained about being sent to a nutritionist at the beginning of this, but he clearly did not ever listen to any of them in the past. Not that it would solve his impulse issue. He needed a therapist, weight loss assistance, addiction assistance, nutritional information, but weight goes up and down on the daily, on the hourly. You pee, it goes up. You got a bowel movement, it goes up and down. You eat something, it goes up and down. Weight loss, fat loss is a long-term thing. Everyone at work hates and distrusts Emmett now because of the previous manager. They dig up he's dating Erin, and Erin is still super pissed at Emmett for wearing Spanx and hiding his flabby skin. The kink in question, there are threats going out of outing Erin's secret kink, and the kink in question is toe sucking, literally speaking. I'm not figuratively speaking on toe sucking, it is literally toe sucking. And Emmett putting on weight, so people are, and since Emmett's putting on weight now, people are turning on him, even though he's only 200 pounds at 5'11", so it really wouldn't look that tubby. Quote, without obexity, he'd just make things worse. He needed to get back on the drug, but how? It was available only through the trial, and he wouldn't receive doses from Halleck for weeks. By that point, he might have gained around another 50 pounds. If you gain 50 pounds in a couple of weeks, you have a medical emergency. You have an addiction emergency. Go to a rehab center. Also, the fact that he'd have EDs this bad and the doctors would say nothing about it and give him no help and say it's just a nutrition issue, even though he is gaining weight again rapidly, they know that he has a background of disordered eating, and even what their drug does causes disordered eating to worsen, but it is beyond negligent to take an ED sufferer and put them on this. Not only that, but the massive weight loss and then the massive weight gain in such a short amount of time would also be expressive of an ED. And this is also why the trial workers would be keeping an eye on the patients to make sure that they're like, well, if he's taking the drug and he's gaining weight, you should probably be checking that. He's more worried about gaining weight and being fat again than the people he murdered and ate. In fact, the cannibalism is hardly even a note to his life. He scares off some coyotes who attack him while outside, because the coyotes are some random thing where they're blaming the cannibalism on coyotes, but they've got no other purpose. Then we get a long blog post trauma dump. This part of the book is the longest and most described part so far and until the end, especially with how short each of the chapters seem to be. So this is some kind of fantasy for sure. And he first says that fat people don't need trauma to be fat, and he hates activists who advocate for that, acting like there is something wrong with being fat because it was done to you. No, I think usually when people are like, there is trauma in the background of this and this is what's causing it, it's because people are seeking help. They want to understand the reason behind their behaviors that they are doing that are not healthy for them, be it mental health or physical health or a combination of the two. And so you go to understand why somebody does that. They're not saying you have to have trauma to be fat. But when you're on My 600-Pound Life, which is what this is referring to when it shows this, it specifically says it in the book, they are being evaluated for their unhealthy relationship with food because they asked for it, or they don't participate well with the therapists. But nobody prescribes that you have to be traumatized to be fat. That's people looking to understand their behaviors so that they can change them. But again, since this doesn't believe that you are responsible at all for your behaviors, then it's going to say this. And yet it also blames his mom and his stepdad for why he acts the way he does. So I don't know why we have this. Well, people don't need to have these in order to be they don't need to be traumatized in order to be fat. But also, let me explain to you how both my mom and my stepdad contributed to me being a fatty. This entire book is contradictory, honestly. Then it goes into a long story of his mom going away to see his sister at college for a few days, leaving Emmett with Hank. Despite knowing that the two of them don't get along, she should have taken Emmett with her to see Abby because they were close anyways. And she lectures him about how and things, they don't get along very well. And so mom lectures Hank about how he treats her son. Hank starves Emmett the whole time that she's gone, starting off only giving him water and a salad once a day and making him exercise. Emmett begs his mom to come home soon when she calls in to check on him. Eventually at school, he tells her that Hank is starving him, so she gives him money to go to a neighbor to give him snacks to keep in his room to eat when Hank is gone. So she understands just how bad Hank is, and yet she still leaves her son alone with this kid, and earlier pretended that she did no wrong. I know that she is not, like, innocent, but I don't know what her character is supposed to be. Emmett is over here eating. It works for a little bit. How long is mom even gone for that all of this is going on? I thought it was just a couple of days, but apparently, I don't know. Hank suddenly is being super nice, gives Emmett money for Pokemon cards, and he can't help but be suspicious of Hank for suddenly being nice, but still takes the 2.5-mile walk to get the cards. When he comes back, Hank is gone. But it's obvious that Hank was in his room and found his snacks. When Hank gets back, he has pizza and ice cream and fries and hamburger and fried chicken and gravy and mac and cheese and all kinds of things. He has Emmett sit down and eat and keeps telling him to fill another plate and another until Emmett vomits. And then he takes Emmett to the garage and puts him on workout equipment and shoves fingers down his throat to make him vomit into a bucket, and then shoves a tube down his throat to make him eat the vomit. Emmett tells his mom all of this that happened when she gets home, and immediately she files for divorce and takes Emmett away from the situation. Emmett says that his mom loves him and she is a great mom, but also still he harbors anger for her for ever bringing Hank into their lives, and nothing she does will ever be good enough to make up for it. Why was any of this needed? He already had reason enough to have disordered eating that this is so beyond anything. Also, he was like, okay, so you're going to have a child with Hank in order to get child support, but Abby is older, so she's from a different man. So was she already getting child support for Emmett? For Abby? Then there's Chris. I thought Chris was older than Emmett, so she never had a child with Hank. So she knew all of this. She knew all of this abuse was going on, didn't have a child with him, still left him alone with Hank. This is so dumb. This is so dumb. I'm getting mad. Emmett goes to his brother's friend's house, a Mexican drug dealer named Nino. The bro has gotten some high doses of the drug illegally. After the doctors have said it's not good to take high doses because it messes with your hormones. He can't pay 10 grand. He can't pay the 10 grand that Nino wants for the drugs. Nino is fucking him though, so Emmett lets Nino fuck him and then steals the drugs when Nino is cleaning up afterwards. Emmett takes a shot and the hunger comes back with a vengeance, and his desires for vengeance do too. So he contacts the other guy from the gym, the one that, texted him on Grindr to make fun of him for being fat, because Emmett is so emotionally unstable that he can't regulate his emotions the same way he can't regulate his eating. Like, this whole chapter started out with him binging all that he can eat and everything, and it is not being enough. Society has problems, but Emmett, it is not the problem here. Then Emmett goes to Justin's house and kills him instead of hooking up with him. Quote, after years of being beaten down, it was Emmett's turn. This is not an empowering moment. I hate that it's treating it like an empowering thing. They find the body in the apartment a few days later because Emmett only took the guy's phone and bloody clothes. So he's not even cannibalizing this guy. He literally just premeditated murder. The drug's not making him cannibalize because otherwise he would have eaten that guy, some part of that guy. It's just, he's angry. He is going to try to use the drug as a scapegoat for his behavior. He doesn't do much to hide any of it anyway, because he's like, it's inevitable he's going to get caught. He considers turning himself in, but then he won't have access to the miracle drug, and he's like, I'll get fat again. Joke's on him. He won't have access to the way he eats in prison either, so he won't gain back all of the pounds. He might get a little tubby depending on how much, of the carbs he eats, but he's not going to be able to binge 2 dozen donuts and $150 of fast food in jail. The weight loss people contact him for an emergency mandatory meeting. He doesn't answer their call, but is given a date. The meeting is with a bunch of heads of projects that asking if the side effects like memory loss have gone away, and then they spend the meeting glazing him about how real he is and how they are all fans of his social media accounts. Quote, I don't think so. I think it's you. How real you are. So many people struggle with their weight, and you never shied away from that struggle. To see you blossom like you have over the last few months, it's inspiring, even to people who aren't, what we mean is, interjected Saito with a hint of impatience, we're trying to get the FDA to consider the long-term health benefits of a product when reviewing application data that may be anomalous or inconclusive. We strongly believe that the sooner we get this product to market, the sooner we can start saving lives. Where do I come in at this? Emmett asked. You see, the FDA has an obligation to consider public input on any proposal rule change, Saito said. In fact, it's often the deciding factor. So you want me, what, to write a letter? Tell them that the drug is safe? Pamela answered, a stunningly beautiful black woman with toned arms and pin-straight steel-gray eyes. When the call comes from public comment, we hope that you'll raise your voice, but that might be a while yet. What we'd like to do is get ahead of that by generating excitement for obexity, putting pressure on the FDA to approve. As one of our most successful trial participants with a passionate and growing online following, we think that you'd make an incredible spokesperson for the product. That's right. They want this one guy with 40,000 followers on Instagram to peer pressure the FDA into letting this drug he's a patient of hit the market for clearance. Who knew that you didn't need to be a scientist or a millionaire to skirt the rules? You just have to have a minor social media presence, half of which are the bioscience employees. He's offered a partnership to be the face of obexity for a lifetime supply and financial incentive. He agrees because the fears of murder and cannibalism is less than the fear of being fat again. Emmett accepts the offer to be the face of obexity, but is asked to get down to 165, so now he's starving again, only to end up binging again. He doubles his medication doses to lose faster, defying the rules for his script, and at a photo shoot, they're like, we're going to airbrush you anyways, so don't worry, you don't need to lose that much weight. There are no negative consequences to him double dosing, by the way. It just, nothing happens. Also, did they not pay for him to get skin removal at this point? Because he's going to be the face of obexity? Now, things are awkward between Aaron and Emmett because, Aaron got him this job at the museum, doesn't like how he looks, and they're avoiding each other. And because Aaron got Emmett the job in a sussy way, if this goes down, it'll go down poorly for both of them. They meet. Emmett forces it out of Aaron that the saggy skin turns him off, and Aaron is like, yeah, so what I didn't sign up for is this. Emmett has a breakdown that he is fat, will always be fat, and always has been fat, and then he runs away to keep from murdering Aaron out of emotional anguish. Emmett comes out on his Instagram for being the face of obexity. Immediately, all of his commenters turn on him for lying to them, and now he's receiving death threats. His coworkers are chortling to themselves, or so he thinks, about his failures, and he leaves work early. Now, Aaron shows up to fire Emmett because he's fake for taking drugs to lose weight. What? This is so stupid. Nobody cares. It's like, oh, you're not really a happy person. You take drugs to fix your depression. You're a fake person. What? What is this? This is so unbelievable. Now, will some people definitely be mad if you pretend you lost weight naturally and you were actually taking cocaine? Absolutely. But are you going to get fired because you were taking drugs to lose weight, so you're obviously a fake person? No. What is this? Except, somebody's bone to pick with everybody who, for some reason, said something unkind to this author who put it in a book. Not only does Emmett get fired for taking drugs to lose weight, but get this, Aaron also calls Emmett a monster for taking pharmaceuticals to lose weight, which, as you'd expect, turns Emmett into an eldritch fat monster. No, I'm not kidding. Quote, why does it, Aaron spluttered, his eyes flashing. You humiliated me. Do you know how many people asked me why I was with you when I told them you'd changed, that you were... Now everyone knows that I'm dating Emmett goes to his feet. What? What am I? Aaron. Fucking monster. It wasn't the word Emmett had expected. The note it struck was dark and dissonant, triggering a response deep in Emmett's body. Part of him welcomed it, the racing of his heart, the frenetic soda pop fizz in his blood. "It's over," Aaron said, not noticing the ripples across Emmett's flesh. "I want you out of my life. You're fired." A pressure ballooned inside of Emmett, a pleasant pain stretching his skin. "I quit." "No." Aaron spat. "You don't quit shit. The only thing you know how to quit is a diet." Okay, so he does quit stuff. Why the frig are you going, "You don't quit shit," and then you go immediately, "Okay, you do quit shit"? Like, stop thinking you're clever! Emmett's fat undulated, expanding. His belly spilled over his waistband, drawing Aaron's eyes. "What the hell?" He stumbled back, horrified. Emmett waded toward him, his clothes stretching tighter around his bloat. The button on his shorts went flying. "Say it again." "What the fuck is happening to you?" The seams of his clothes began to tear. "Call me a monster again." He takes a bite out of Aaron's neck and Aaron falls to the ground. So Aaron's consumed down to the bones by the beast here. Lizette calls saying that the cops are onto him because he's stupid and threw out his designer one-of-a-kind clothing with her labels on them when trying to destroy evidence. So you didn't hide the body before, but then he's trying to hide clothing now. If you're going to not try, then don't try. Now the company calls out. Maybe he didn't get promoted at freaking Target because he's an idiot. I'm just saying. Now Bioscience calls. It outs Emmett for knowing that he's killing people, and they offer to help him hide the evidence and himself from the cops. Saito gets him an apartment that she says he can stay at as needed. She says that she is helping him because obesity is meant to cause cannibalism in a minor number of patients for revenge's sake. I don't know how you make sure that happens. She didn't like being treated as nothing until men wanted to fuck her for being thin, so she wanted to attack all the people for the guilt of mocking her, even if they didn't. The police chief is paid off to slow the investigation. The way that he was bribed is that he had diabetes and he got on obesity, and now she now bribes Emmett with money and comfort that if he takes the fall for the murder, then they'll make sure he's taken care of for the rest of his life. She gives him 6 shots to shoot up with now, in case, he goes for when he goes to prison, because he won't be able to take them then, and he does all of them as if they'll carry over for 6. Like, you turned into an Eldritch Beast after doing 2. What do you think 6 is going to do? Also, this isn't even Dr. Saito's thing, so, like, why is... It just wanted to have the plot twist that the person behind all of this is his stepdad that forced him to vomit. I don't know what we're doing here. Other than being dumb. After he takes these 6 shots, Emmett wakes up skinnier than ever from all of those shots, finds medical papers that tell him that he has no control over his body, so the lists of foods that he ate earlier, like a giant burrito the size of a baby and at least a dozen donuts, 4 meals at McDonald's, and another $150 worth of junk food, all before dinner, are not the things that affect his weight. No way does any of that affect his weight. It is not calories in. Like he was complaining earlier that it's all bullshit. Nah, none of this matters. I'm not saying that there's not complicated science and other things, biological science, that comes into play when it comes to losing weight, and like cortisol and different diets affect different people and all. I'm not saying that it's not complicated and there are not multiple factors involved, but I'm saying when you eat as much as Emmett does, to the exaggerated amount that Emmett does, you cannot blame it on friggin' genetics. But, this book is, here's some scientific papers saying nothing that I eat actually contributes to my weight, when it's the list of food I just gave you. He also finds a random copy of the Book of Mormon and a message to some guy named Hank in these files that he is searching. Because, yeah, he's just looking through files of company files. He meets with Lizette and asks her to take him to the museum. He talks to his mom briefly on the phone, and I can't say it'll matter at this point why he's talking to his mom. He gets to the museum to look at a specific image in the cannibalism department, finding that Cecil H. Smith of the Monstera is also C. Hank Strouder, his stepdad. How is it that you went to this thing earlier, you saw this whole setup, and you did not recognize the stepdad who abused you and made you eat your own vomit? How did you not see that face and go, that is my stepdad? This is out of nowhere. You deliberately put this display in there. This author was so lazy, in my opinion, that there was no way that they could do this reveal. So they decided to do it like this. And it is so freaking stupid. Quote, when I knew him, he went by his middle name, Henry, Hank for short. But after he was fired, he started going by his first name again, Cecil, and legally changed his last name to Smith. I'm guessing that this was a nod to Joseph Smith, the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Hank was raised LDS, and his turn towards weight loss sciences may have been inspired by a verse in the Book of Mormon. I'm speculating here. This is so freaking stupid. He then quits social media, saying fat people have suffered enough and he doesn't need to justify himself. Emmett flees the museum before the staff can catch him, even though they let him in there in the first place, and museums have cameras everywhere. Have you ever been in a museum? He runs, admires the city that he grew up in but never knew because he was afraid of being seen, and is caught by the corrupted cop and his stepdad, who is now decided to be here all of a sudden. All of the while, his body is massively changing size into a globby monster man. Hank monologues about how he did this as a favor to Emmett and all fat people, and it's okay to trade other people for fat people to live. Why? Hank hates fat people. The way that he treated Emmett as a stepson is saying that he is worth less than other people. So why are other people who are thinner worth trading for fat people in Hank's eyes? Answer me this. Just freaking start eliminating, genociding the fat people. Like, that's closer to what Hank would do based on what Hank did. And why do we have reasons for Hank creating cannibalism and also reasons for Dr. Saito creating cannibalism, even though this is all inspired by Hank's doing? Like, what are we doing here? This just feels like a pantser. This feels like a pantser just trying to throw stuff at you at the end. It's so dumb. Not to insult people's creativity, but you made me read this. Emmett keeps expanding in size until he's like 4 times the size that he was, and he fights Hank, resulting in him flying off the top of the tower because he ran upstairs into a tower, I'm assuming, just for the tableau of trying to like ram Hank off of the tower, and then his flat, floppy body just over the edge and splatting on the ground below. So yeah, he dies. There's a long report at the end saying how society, the world, food corporations, influencers, pretty much everything but Emmett were the reason that he was both fat and angry. They claim that he was predisposed to anger. His sister glazes him and says that if only she had had anorexia, maybe he wouldn't have had an ED. That's not how that works. Also, he was not a kind dude. Why are we freaking glazing him right now? He called his 4-year-old niece a bitch for not squealing loud enough at her birthday gift that he gave her. That happened at her party. He gave her the gift. She squealed, but not loud enough with enough enthusiasm for him, and he called her a stupid bitch. Anyway, the company concludes that their drug isn't dangerous, and the FDA approves it for market. The end. Let me know your thoughts. I want to know your thoughts, like for real. So the genre/audience satire, this feels very YA in how it's written. Because no consequences, no one cares about the cannibalism, really. I mean, Lizette doesn't even hardly respond to it. Hook, at 20%, we know where this is going in general because it doesn't hide it from the prologue and the opening message. It doesn't hide it from the synopsis either. It's not a mystery of what will happen to Emmett, but how he gets there, what influences him, and watching his transformation into a monster. Maybe even how it ends because we don't know, even from the description of other things. So from the get-go, we know that Emmett is overweight, he works hard, or he says he works hard, he feels overlooked and judged for his morbid obesity, and is seemingly rejected from opportunities because of said obesity. He also seemingly has some level of entitlement to others because he thinks that others should be punished for not wanting to date him for being fat. He gets on a clinical trial for a new miracle drug to help him lose weight and is more driven than ever after losing a dream opportunity, and he feels extreme shame when it comes to eating in general, both from his upbringing and from the way that he looks, to the point that he gets anxious about being seen eating. So, now knowing that he will assume that cannibalism is because of the drug, the question is, where will he go from there, and what will he lose? We've discovered that everything, except for, the women in his life that don't blame him even though he was bitches to them. Language and writing. I think that this book shoots itself in the foot by making the cannibalism and the oh no, there's a killer on the loose thing dragged throughout the book be in the prologue, and somehow it's still treated as a mystery. It would make much more sense if it was after Emmett had already taken the drugs and was already a cannibal, but it acts like the cannibalism is a rising action and climax, but it is already given away from the get-go. So in my opinion, it's hard to sustain. This is where it's going to go as a narrative outline, from the first page of the prologue and then not go anywhere else from there. The pacing then comes off as very slow, as well as the cannibalism shouldn't be the focused climax, but rather something instilled already, and the complications it adds to Emmett's life as he strives for thinness, acceptance, whether it's self or of others, and hiding his secret so that the payoff of the murder and so that's the payoff of the murder investigations, which that should have been a murder investigation that keeps circling back to Emmett with Lizette helping him. I don't know, this feels lopsided and oddly paced, with it saying cannibalism up front at everything while also it's taking its time to get there when you're supposed to be watching a downfall. This book is also written in multimedia kind of way, with blog posts, interview scripts, investigation reports, and Instagram posts. I personally didn't think that method added anything to the story, as often as these inserts just repeated things that we already knew, or did action scenes that happened off the page that we should have seen because it would have added tension. I think what would have worked better to do the same thing would have been to have Emmett have therapy and talk to a therapist about things as they progressed, rather than having a weight loss blog. He could still do Instagram posts, and it could be just as much about attention, how the attention affected him or whatever, but the blog and the Instagram for weight loss felt redundant. And if he had a therapist, we could have seen what he was telling a therapist about himself versus what he did in the world and how that contradicted. Description. There's little to no description throughout, as the book chooses to skip over everything and just tell you about it later. Emmett has a violent temper, but we have never seen it. It just says it. He has an unending hunger, but we rarely see him gorge himself. We just get told in paragraphs that he did this. We don't see him struggling with that hunger and then shoving food down his gullet. He disappears and his memory has memory issues, but we never actually see him have memory issues. Just him telling us in posts that he did, or how people feel. There's just like this feeling of, why did you write this, when the book feels like it doesn't even want to be here because it skips everything. Now, I already mentioned the issues with the world building, and that is that I have a hard time believing any of the things that are more grounded in reality than I do with anything that is fantastical. Like, I don't freaking care that he takes, 2 shots and then suddenly now he, is way hyper fixed. His weight got super fixed, or that he took 6 shots and then suddenly he became a blob monster. Oh, 2 shots was the Eldritch thing. I really don't care about that, because you're already being ridiculous. What I do care about is if you're going to critique doctors and HIPAA and social media and all these other things, you need some level of grounding. If you make it all to such a ridiculous extent that it's not believable, then your criticisms are not believable, even within the context of your made-up story where things are over the top. At least that's how I feel. So I couldn't believe any of this, and then all the criticisms feel contradictory for multiple reasons, as were pointed out in the synopsis. Characters. None of the characters mattered. They didn't really have personalities. Emmett was supposed to be a hero for wanting to murder and eat people because they were mean to him, and the whole point was to critique fat phobia and how it affected people, and to say that, it was all of everybody else that caused him to end up dead and a cannibal because they made him feel bad for being fat, but that's not how it came off. Everything is so focused on fat that everybody is a caricature. It is obsessed with fatness, which more shows me the mindset of the person that wrote this, that is so obsessed with weight and how other people view them and what the assumptions are of other people viewing them. And the book doesn't have to actually acknowledge any of the other characters doing things, but it does show that others do care about Emmett, and Emmett can't see it because Emmett hates himself. So that is part of his character. Lizette has nothing to her except that she is the super fat, fat pride, person of color, female, sassy sidekick. That's all she is. Mom is just a bunch of straw man, and Hank just exists to be a constant abuser and suddenly a main villain at the end. I don't freaking know. None of it matters. Plot. The corporation knows some of their patients, one of their patients, have snapped and eaten a person, but don't monitor any of them still. Like, they have it in the files. Even if you ignore the HIPAA violations of this guy having access to other patient files that name them, they knew or assumed. The one lady went to court at least and then blamed the freaking obesity for her cannibalism. If they knew that, they would be watching patients through the trials instead of being like, you're on your own, just report back to us, and then not answering their phones. What the frick? It's all just lazy writing to, like, spew stuff. Themes. The obsession with weight and fatness in this feels like someone's hyper delusion that comes with being excessively self-aware, and that is a bigger problem than the external factors. And so maybe that's the actual critique of fat phobia, is self issues that then projects everywhere else and ruins your life because you're so self-aware of your own delusional projections. The fact that every person he interacts with had to bring up weight in general, to the point that someone at a job interview had to, that it unironically used the phrase whispered sweet microaggressions in my ear, and some random woman at the grocery store stopped him to talk to him about working out or he would die. Like, it's so over the top ridiculous that it feels like it's self-induced neurosis from being overly self-aware. And I wrote about freaking shirtless Russians working in a coffee shop as undercover. I wrote about freaking business, freaking vacation standard dudes wearing Hawaiian shirts, feds, while in Ukraine in March. Okay, I know a thing or two about ridiculous, and this was not believable. I'd say so much more of this comes off as an issue is Emmett's view of himself and others. He also lacks any self-control that he then blames all of his issues on other people. There is also an issue of others treating him poorly, such as the assumption that he's lazy and disgusting for being fat, could possibly be a good worker. But there is also his envy that destroys him, and his self-obsession that if only he was like everyone else in his life, that is skinnier, then he'd be successful. Even then, Lizette, his roommate, is doing fine. So it's really low confidence mixed in with the assumption that everyone else has it easier because of the things that make him different from them, which he also never really reflects that despite Lizette being fatter and shorter than him, she's successful in what she is doing. So it's not the fatness that's holding him back, it's his attitude, which, regardless of your weight, some people are just never going to like you. So, like, you can't really take that to heart. I know it's hard. It's easier said than done, but still. Something else that bothers me about this is that none of it touches on self-control, health, or autonomy in any way. It kind of just keeps saying it's somebody else's fault. It's somebody else's fault the whole time, and that's part of the critique of fat phobia and the issues of the world and society. Clearly, Emmett emotionally eats, as he eats for happy and he eats for sad, and he feels a lot of shame about eating to the point of wanting to eat alone so no one sees him. When he takes the miracle method, he eats more than he ever did, and it's not addressed as any part, but that society is the problem for judging fat people for eating too much when it's actually out of their control, which is within the biosciences, medical things, and it uses them as a reason for why he's not accountable for eating and his health as a relation to his eating. Don't get me wrong, the treatment, the dismissal, the judgment of people for just being overweight is ridiculous and often over the top, but also this weakens its narrative by acting like there is no autonomy and the person has no ability whatsoever to make any sort of change for themselves. And also, that includes the mindset. So not only physical changes, but also just believing that you are worth it, or acting, thinking that you are worth it, and not mistreating other people. But he actually did see himself as better than Lizette when he lost weight. He saw himself as better than other people when he lost weight, which is really why he didn't want to get fat again. And this continually blames either outside sources that make them fat or outside sources that make them skinny. And you best just like yourself how you are, and everyone else better like you too, because you can't change anything yourself. And that does seem to be what this book is saying. Quote, I mean, from a health perspective, Lizette, being Latina isn't so good for my health. It increases my risk of pretty much everything. Heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, which I've got. Would you say there's something wrong with having brown skin? That's not a choice. If being thin was just a choice, don't you think that people would choose it and not have people like you judging them all the time? That's why drugs like obesity exist, right? Because it's not that fucking simple. Obesity is a medical treatment to help people improve their health. Health, health. I'm going to write a children's book called The Boy That Cried Health. Like any of you give a shit and you talk about health because it's more acceptable than admitting that you hate fat people. Fat women especially. There is certainly a lot of difficulty that can come with weight for a variety of reasons. Being a 355-pound, 5'1" woman is not equitable to being Latina as a health risk. It also doesn't work constantly to reinforce that this guy has an eating disorder, you know, with his binge eating and vomiting, which he admits to and says he has an eating disorder, and then somehow say that it's also not responsible for his weight and that it's not healthy. You can't argue binging is healthy in the same way that you can't argue starvation is healthy. This undermines whatever commentary it's trying to make because you cannot allow self-insert Luke to be at fault for anything in this victim fantasy. This book also constantly presents an eating disorder, including any time food is around, he has to eat all of it or eat nothing, and it never addresses but instead blames society. It is not society that is causing you to sit down for a piece of cake and having you eat the entire thing in one sitting. Overall, I don't disagree that the world generally treats you different based on how you look, and especially it's true when you're overweight, morbidly obese, skinny, beautiful, whatever. And will probably be worse in some parts of the world where beauty is valued more. And you're going to just in general be like, I've heard plenty of stories of people losing weight and then suddenly being seen by others. I can say I've never really been seen by anybody. I know why. I'm a goblin. But the way this book is written is that as soon as you're thinner, your life is just like way better in every single way, and everyone loves you in the same way. And incel views women as being life on easy mode, and women never face anything and just exist and get money thrown at them and wangs thrown at them and opportunities thrown at them and have zero accountability. Like, it's the same thing where I've seen people genuinely arguing that women choose suffering when they choose to live like a man, because men are born into suffering, women are not born into suffering, women are born into anti-suffering, and the only reason that a woman would suffer is because she has chosen to live like a man. Like, I've seen that. Genuinely. That's the exaggeration that's here. So it comes off as less sincere and less a critique on society and how it treats overweight people, and more about somebody's insecurities, the treatment they received, and just how much it messed them up to the point of not seeing reality and the revenge that they wish that they could get. And the death at the end with him feels like some martyrdom complex where it's like, well, it's because of you that I am dead now. Because then you've got like the women white knighting him, the women glazing him, that it's all society's fault that he is dead now. I mean, corporations are evil, for sure, but also, you did this to yourself. But that final act of him going over the thing after running around and recognizing that his stepdad was the ultimate evil was all to set him up as a victim and a martyr. It's bizarre to me that this book can present health issues that come with extreme weight, such as sleep apnea, CPAPs, and diabetes, and how it got better when he lost weight, but then it still rages that there is no ill health caused by extreme overweight, and it's all society and fat phobia that is actually the problem. I don't know what that means. That was my experience with this book. I am so looking forward to your guys' thoughts on this, to the discussions. So looking forward to the comments. Please leave one at least, please. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, hearing about this weird book. If you've ever heard of it before, let me know. Have you read this book? Will you read this book? With that said, have a great weekend and good luck.
To my children, Tommy, Annabelle, and Ike. If you forget everything else I said in the lifetime I had with you, I need you to remember these 3 things. 1. I believe a woman's love is the most powerful thing on this earth. It can start wars, end them, and change the devil himself into someone God might see worthy of giving a second chance. She don't owe this love to anyone, but she do carry it around with her so long as she is living, and to give it away is something special. This is why evil will do anything it can to pervert women's nature and destroy their innocence. Of every crime you might commit during your lifetime, be it of daring or necessity, for every defiance you may act out against God, government, or man, avoid harming the innocent, for the day that we become bloodthirsty beasts where love don't exist anymore is the day hell on earth has come. And as bad as it may seem at times nowadays, we ain't there yet. For this reason, minimize violence done to and by women. As givers of life, it's against their nature to do harm. Every act of violence done to them is meant to break their souls, turning what should be a giver of hope into a bitter black widow, destroying lives in the mercy of her care for no reason but to quiet the corruption of her own self. It is only when you come across these sorts of women that you should put them down. 2. Everything you do in your life will create consequences, both seen and unseen, reaching far beyond what you can imagine. Nothing you do exists solely within your arm's reach, and you'll never be able to anticipate what all your decisions will do. Think hard of every action you take, because you won't know how long your choices will stalk you. Be firm in knowing who you are outside of the noise, and live beyond the expectations or news or rumors of the day. 3. There ain't anything stronger than the family you build for yourself. Protect the ones you love with your life, and they'll give you theirs in return. Family ain't defined by blood, understand that. And for as strong as the bonds of your family are, know that you'll find just as much passion in the people who hate you. While you'll risk your life for the ones that you care about, those who find your existence to be an insult will risk themselves to put an end to their affliction. As cruel as it may seem, a man running on hate will stop at nothing until one of yous is dead. Don't let you be the ones taken from, be it by outlaw, lawmen, or anyone in between. The only one who'll be looking out for you is you and yours. Showing mercy to men who wouldn't show it to you is a costly mistake. Maybe there's another way to be, but in all my years, I ain't found a way around a man's seed for greed and pride. Sometimes I believe there ain't the ability for man to change at all, be it by lead or legislation. I ain't claiming to be right about nothing. On many things, I wish I hadn't the experience. But what I want is for my kids to live a life better than the one I did, and to avoid the hardships I went through while finding the truth and purpose in what matters more than all the gold in this country. It's my hope that by sharing the things I learned, my kids will be better than their old man ever was, and that what I done ain't what people remember me for, but who y'all are gonna become that'll be the legend of Bill Cassidy.